Chapter 849. The principal also mentioned this foreign language competition during the meeting last Friday. Although the notice was given at the last minute, the school's higher-ups have expressed that they attach great importance to this foreign language competition. Later, I will select a few students from our class with excellent oral English to participate in this competition. Of course, if you have excellent English but poor oral English, you won't have a chance to participate in this competition. But students, don't be discouraged. There are many similar competitions. Now, I will announce the name list of students who will participate in the foreign language competition on Wednesday. The homeroom teacher, Teacher Yu, stood on the podium and said a lot. The students sitting below shook their heads and some even yawned. A foreign language competition like this would never happen to them. Therefore, some people remained in a state of half-listening state. Teacher Yu announced the names of 2 students in the class. When she announced the third name, she deliberately glanced at Yun Jian. Then, Teacher Yu announced the last name with a smile. Yun Jian. There were a total of 3 places. Teacher Yu selected the 3 students with the best oral English. After announcing the names, Teacher Yu also mentioned that Chen Xinyi and Zhang Xiaofeng had applied for leave. As for Chen Xinyi and Zhang Xiaofeng, Teacher Yu only briefly told them about their leave. She did not mention the reason. Originally, Chen Xinyi was also one of the candidates for this foreign language competition. However, after such an incident, she could only stay at home for a while to recuperate. After saying these things, Teacher Yu returned to her office with her textbooks. For the foreign language competition, Grade 3 Class A, which was Yun Jian's class, only had 3 places. Yun Jian had 1. Without a doubt, Yun Jian's foreign language results were the best among the 3 of them. Her oral English was needless to say. Moreover, when she first came to Longmen First High School, the school arranged for her to study abroad. That was to study abroad as a foreign exchange student. Yun Jian could still remember the place where she studied abroad. It was Yana High School in Country Y. Back then, she had to have good oral English to go abroad. This time, it was a foreign language competition. Although she was not going abroad, oral English was still very important. It could be said that this foreign language competition was a competition of speaking. After class, without Chen Xinyi and Zhang Xiaofeng chattering, Yun Jian felt a little uncomfortable. In the next few days, Yun Jian was quite idle. Although he claimed to be free, he was actually pacing back and forth between school, home, Falcon Hall, and New Cruise. Sometimes, he would go to the army to train for a while. After Chu Ning and the rest went to the military academy, Yun Jian went to the military training camp without delay. Time passed quickly and it was Wednesday morning in the blink of an eye. In the morning, Yun Jian walked into the classroom with her backpack. She saw Zhang Jian staring at her in a daze. "Grandmaster, why are you still here? Didn't the teacher ask the 3 of you who are going to participate in the competition to gather at the school field earlier yesterday? It's almost 6:00. Zhang Jian looked at Yun Jian as if he couldn't believe that Yun Jian would be late. It was only then that Yun Jian recalled that there was such a thing. Yesterday, Teacher Yu had specially reminded the 3 students who were going to the foreign language competition on Wednesday to come to school earlier. They had to gather at the field at 5:35 in the morning because the lead teacher would start counting the number of students. Chapter 850. Yun Jian was never a forgetful person, nor was she a sleepy person. However, even though she was a full 25 minutes late, Yun Jian did not show any signs of fear. Usually, if a high school student with good academic performance suddenly realized that he was late, and that he was late by nearly half an hour, he would definitely be scared to the point of breaking out in cold sweat. Even their steps would be shaky and their hearts would tremble, afraid that they would be scolded by the teacher. However, even though Yun Jian was late, she did not show the slightest hint of fear. With a fling of her arm, the bag in Yun Jian's hand was flung from the door to her desk in a curve. The students in the class who saw this scene were all stunned, but they quickly reacted. After all, Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier and the killing god of Team Monarch. It was just a school bag, so she naturally did it quite smoothly. "Let's go," Yun Jian's melodious voice was heard. Zhang Jian nodded after a slight pause. Yun Jian then turned and left the classroom, running towards the field. Zhang Jian watched Yun Jian's footsteps and could not help but take a few more looks of admiration. "She's my grandmaster indeed. She's so cool," Zhang Jian exclaimed. A male classmate beside him slapped Zhang Jian's head hard and teased him, "What kind of luck do you have to acknowledge Yun Jian as your grandmaster?" As he spoke, his eyes were filled with envy. Zhang Jian laughed and replied, "Luckily, I'm smart enough to acknowledge Zhang Xiaofeng as my master. Speaking of which, how dare you slap me?" Yun Jian could not see what happened in the classroom. At that moment, Yun Jian was already striding happily to the field. All the students who had gathered for the foreign language competition were already on the bus. When Yun Jian walked over, the group of students who were already on the bus were still looking at her through the window. For a moment, Yun Jian became the center of attention, the first student who was late. There were only a few students in each class who could participate in the foreign language competition, so it was natural that the students took it seriously. However, when they saw Yun Jian's nonchalant attitude, they could not help but take a few more looks. "Student, which class are you from? What's your name? Do you know that you're late?" A bald male teacher saw Yun Jian and jogged over, scolding Yun Jian with a stern expression. If she was an ordinary student, she would have lowered her head and admitted her mistake after being scolded by this male teacher. However, Yun Jian only raised her head slightly to look at him. "Grade 3 Class A, Yun Jian." With that, she made her way to the bus. There was only one bus parked on the field, and it was a multi-seater bus. In other words, this bus could seat a lot of people. There were not many students participating in the competition this time, and Class A was an important class, so they were given more seats. They were given 3 seats at once, while the other classes usually only had 1. "Student Yun Jian, wait." The bald male teacher saw that she did not pay attention to him and was unhappy. The male teacher was a rather rigid teacher who was inflexible. He had once thought that Yun Jian's behavior was disrespectful to the teacher. Yun Jian raised her eyebrows and turned around. "Don't be late next time. The whole school is waiting for you. If you're late again, you won't have the chance to participate in this kind of competition in the future." These words made it sound like Yun Jian was lucky to be able to participate in this competition. Chapter 851. Actually, the bus wasn't parked here to wait for Yun Jian. The bus was parked here because it was supposed to depart after the designated time. Moreover, there were still some teachers who hadn't arrived yet. Usually, in the teacher's point of view, they would only allow themselves to be late, but not their students. If a teacher was late, they would just laugh it off. However, when a student was late, the teacher would harshly criticize the student's mistake. Some teachers would even use an unforgivable tone to criticize the student. Their crime was even more serious than a criminal on death row. Of course, if one was lucky enough to meet a good teacher, they wouldn't be criticized. "Oh." After the bald male teacher finished speaking, Yun Jian indifferently spat out a word. Then, Yun Jian walked towards the bus. The bald male teacher had never seen a student like Yun Jian. Seeing that his words were ignored by Yun Jian once again, Yun Jian had already walked towards the bus. The male teacher could only clench his teeth in hatred. She was a student from grade 3 Class A, right? How dare she disregard her teachers? When he returned, he would tell this student's form teacher to discipline this student properly. Just as the male teacher was staring at Yun Jian's figure with hatred, Yun Jian had already arrived at the entrance of the bus. She stepped on the 3 steps of the bus and easily walked into the bus. There was a female teacher on the bus who was managing the order. When she saw Yun Jian get on the bus, the female teacher spoke very politely and courteously. "Student, which class are you from? What's your name?" The female teacher looked at Yun Jian and spoke in a rather sweet voice. Although the female teacher's appearance wasn't very eye-catching, her sweet voice was refreshing to Yun Jian. "Class A, Yun Jian." Yun Jian still replied indifferently. "All right, your seat is on the left of the 3rd row, by the window." The female teacher pointed at a window seat and said to Yun Jian. These seats were all arranged by the school long ago, so there was no need to fight for seats. One had to admit that the teachers of Longmany Junior High School arranged things in an orderly manner. Yun Jian nodded and walked towards where the female teacher indicated. There was another girl sitting beside Yun Jian, but she kept quiet when she saw Yun Jian walking over. The girl was quite good-looking, but she ignored Yun Jian when she saw her. Yun Jian did not like to pay attention to others either, so she did not speak to the girl along the way. The foreign language competition this time was held in Longmen City's Foreign Languages High School. The most famous junior and senior high schools in Longmen City were Longmeny Junior High School and DE Senior High School respectively. The Foreign Languages High School had 2 departments, the junior department and the senior department. In other words, those who studied in junior high school and foreign languages high school could be promoted to senior high school. Of course, compared to the other schools to be mentioned to TE senior high school. S to be to say, each school of course. S to the school to the end, of course, to the point, to the school. Of course, many students in foreign languages high school knew languages that other schools did not know, such as Japanese, Korean, and so on. The competition this time was a foreign language competition, so perhaps it was a coincidence that the competition venue was set up in Foreign Languages High School. Chapter 852. In addition to middle school students, there would also be high school students participating in the competition this time. However, Yun Jian had already heard from her homeroom teacher that middle school students would only compete with middle school students, and high school students would only compete with high school students. The 2 schools had nothing to do with each other. Even the foreign language competition venue was not in the same place. Yun Jian was a day student, so she would go home every day. She guessed that her brother, Yun Yi, would definitely come to an event like today's. As Yun Yi was a boarding student, Yun Jian had not seen Yun Yi from the weekend until Wednesday, so she did not have the chance to ask if he would be participating in the competition today. Moreover, the foreign language competition venue was not the same for middle school and high school, so Yun Jian did not know if she would meet Yun Yi today. When they arrived at their destination, the female teacher who was in charge of the order said, "We're here. Students, get off the bus in an orderly manner. Don't rush when you get off the bus. Walk slowly one by one. Don't push or squeeze." The bus sent the students directly to the entrance of Foreign Languages High School. Looking at the huge signboard at the entrance of Foreign Languages High School, the students realized that they had arrived at the entrance of Foreign Languages High School. Right in front of them was a huge floor-to-ceiling signboard with 4 large stone words carved on it, Foreign Languages High School. "Students, follow me. You don't have to line up." The female teacher who was in charge of the order was standing below the bus. She was arranging things in an orderly manner. Only 3 students from Yun Jian's class were participating in the foreign language competition today. Other than Yun Jian, the other 2 students were girls. Moreover, the 2 girls were close to each other, and they did not usually greet or socialize with Yun Jian. Therefore, after Yun Jian got off the bus, she stood there alone. The people around her were all in groups. Students of this age rarely walked alone when they went out for competitions. Some students even thought that it was embarrassing to walk alone, as if they didn't have any friends. However, this situation did not happen to Yun Jian at all. Yun Jian had an excellent temperament. Even if she stood there silently, she would attract the attention of the people around her. At this moment, Yunjian had her hands in her trouser pockets. She stood there lazily with her thumbs hooked on the sides of her trouser pockets. Right now, the morning sun was shining on Yunjian at a slanted angle. No matter how one looked at it, Yunjian was like a beauty bathing in the sun. However, at this moment, Yunjian carried a trace of unapproachable aura, which made everyone present unconsciously blink. After the female teacher did a head count, she led everyone into foreign languages high school and headed straight for the competition venue, the junior high school. Yunjian followed the group all the way forward. When they arrived at the competition venue, everyone was stunned by the lineup in front of them. The people standing in front of him could be considered as a sea of people. After all the students from junior high schools in Longmen City who were proficient in English were gathered here. Of course, this was only limited to junior high school students. As for the senior high school students, it was on the other end. Yunjian planned to go to the senior high school venue after her competition to see if she could find Yunyi. Just as Yunjian thought about it, a surprised female voice came from her left. "Hey, it's you. Are you here for the competition too?" Yunjian's eyelid twitched at the voice and she turned to look. Chapter 853. Yunjian was slightly surprised when she saw Ning Lanlan. After all, Ning Lanlan had come to borrow some salt when they barbecued by Nilong River previously. That was just a chance encounter in their journey. It was rare to have a chance encounter like this in one's life. There were many people one could meet in one's life, but most of them were just passers-by. Most of them would never meet again. Therefore, Yunjian was slightly taken aback when she saw Ning Lanlan. Yunjian calmed down after her initial shock. "What a coincidence," Yunjian replied with a faint smile since she did not have a bad impression of Ning Lanlan. "Are you here for the competition alone too?" Ning Lanlan asked in delight when she saw that Yunjian did not have any friends with her. Yunjian nodded. Ning Lanlan was obviously here for the foreign language competition alone. Girls usually liked to travel in groups, so did Ning Lanlan. Therefore, when Ning Lanlan heard that Yunjian was here alone, she was delighted. Since Yunjian did not have a companion, she could walk with Yunjian naturally. "Right, I haven't asked you for your name before." Ning Lanlan suddenly thought of this. Moreover, she was a straightforward person, so she spoke up immediately. Yunjian answered with a nod. Yunjian. Ning Lanlan repeated and looked at Yunjian, speaking to Yunjian in an envious tone. "Yunjian, your name is so nice. Can I call you Jianjian?" Yunjian raised her brow when she heard Ning Lanlan call her Jianjian. She was instantly reminded of Chen Sini. Chen Sini called her Jianjian too. "Sure," Yunjian replied softly to Ning Lanlan. Ning Lanlan nodded excitedly. After getting to know Ning Lanlan stood beside Yunjian. Ning Lanlan only left Yunjian's side reluctantly when the competition was about to begin. "Jianjian, I'll go gather first. I'll look for you when the competition is over." Ning Lanlan chatted with Yunjian for a while and realized that she and Yunjian hit it off very well. Therefore, Ning Lanlan did not forget to call out to Yunjian when she was about to head to the gathering point. Yunjian also found Ning Lanlan quite interesting. She had a good impression of Ning Lanlan at first. Now that she heard Ning Lanlan's words, she smiled faintly and nodded at Ning Lanlan. After Ning Lanlan left, Yunjian and the others gathered immediately. "I heard that there will be a foreign student coming over to be the judge later. So, everyone, do your best. We don't need to get first place. Our school just needs to get second place." The female teacher stood in front of everyone and said. This was preaching before the competition. The reason why the female teacher said that they did not need to get first place and that they only needed to get second place was because there was foreign languages high school above them. Foreign languages high school's forte was foreign languages, and their teachers were all hired from overseas, so they spoke authentic English. That was why the female teacher said what she said. After all, foreign languages high school had always won first place in foreign language competitions over the years. Look, isn't that guy a foreign student? He's the one who's going to be our judge later. One of the students suddenly saw a tall and sturdy boy walking towards them from afar. What was different was that the boy's skin was fair. In addition to his unique appearance, it was obvious that he was a foreigner. Yun Jian turned to look and could not help squinting when she saw who it was. It was not for anything else but the boy. He was the one who provoked Yun Jian when she went abroad to study at Yana High School for a week back then. Chapter 854. Lawson's full name was Charlie Lawson. At that moment, Lawson was being led into the invigilator's venue by a teacher. The students who came to participate in the competition were stunned. Firstly, most of them had never seen a foreigner before. Hence, they could not help but take a few more glances at Lawson when they saw him. Secondly, Lawson's looks were considered handsome among the foreigners. Hence, some of the girls present were slightly stunned. Yun Jian pursed her lips. She did not expect to meet Lawson here. Lawson had already been led into the invigilator's venue by the teacher. However, just as Lawson walked into the venue, his eyes had already caught sight of Yun Jian before he even stepped into the venue. He was ecstatic when he snapped out of his daze. Yun Jian. Lawson saw Yun Jian and walked over in surprise. He called out Yun Jian's name in glib British Mandarin. The Chinese name was not changed when it was translated into English. The only difference was that it was changed to pinyin. Hence, everyone present could hear who Lawson was calling out to. However, in the next second, Lawson had already abandoned the teacher who led him and ran towards Yun Jian. Seeing this, the surrounding students, including those from Longmen First High School and those from other schools, were all shocked. This foreign student knew a student from country Z. Just as everyone was thinking about this, Lawson had already run in front of Yun Jian. When he saw Yun Jian, Lawson waved his English that most of the people present could not understand. He said to Yun Jian, "I knew you would come. I came all the way from school to find you. Yun Jian, I want to compete with you again." The English spoken by the people from country Z was slightly different from the English spoken by the foreigners. Moreover, Lawson spoke very fluently. Most of the people present were fluent in English, but they could only understand the gist of what Lawson was saying. Some of them could only speak simple English, so they could not understand what Lawson was saying in English. At this moment, everyone present was thinking about one thing. Among the junior high school students, even Ji Shuatang, who was known as the foreign language genius from the foreign languages high school, would have a hard time talking to foreigners, right? Who was Ji Shuatang? Ji Shuatang was a junior high student of foreign languages high school. Everyone knew that Ji Shuatang was a foreign language genius. The reason why she was called a foreign languages prodigy was because she had been learning foreign languages since she was a child. However, the most shocking thing was that this girl named Ji Shuatang was only 16 years old, but she was already learning 3 foreign languages. English was Ji Shuatang's strength. How could someone like Ji Shuatang, who was publicly acknowledged as a foreign languages prodigy, not be present at such a big event? At this moment, a young girl with a tall and slender figure was standing not far away. This young girl was quite pretty. She had the typical big eyes and small lips, but at this moment, she raised her head and looked down on others. This young girl was Ji Shuatang, who was known as the foreign languages prodigy. At this moment, there was a girl standing beside her. The girl was asking her, "Shuatang, what did that foreigner say to that girl over there?" Being questioned by this girl, Ji Shuatang put on an arrogant look. What else can he ask? Can't you understand such simple English? As she spoke, Ji Xuetong raised her peacock-like head even more arrogantly. Her tone was full of disdain for the girl beside her. Chapter 855. Ji Xuetong could not help but think proudly. She could easily communicate with a foreigner like Lawson in proper English. Even she, who was widely acknowledged as a foreign languages prodigy, could not do it. Could the girl standing over there have the ability to do it? She did not believe it. If Yun Jian could communicate with foreigners so easily, then her title of foreign languages prodigy would be hers. Although the girl standing beside Ji Xuetong was unhappy with Ji Xuetong's tone, she still tried to flatter Ji Xuetong. Of course I don't understand, but it's fine as long as our Xuetong understands. Xuetong, you're so good. It must be easy for you to talk to foreigners over there, right? Ji Xuetong forced a smile. That's, of course. Although she was good, she was not at the stage where she could talk to foreigners. She could talk normally, but if it was a deep conversation, she could not do it. Even so, Ji Xuetong was very confident that Yun Jian could not talk to Lawson. After all, even a foreign languages prodigy, like her, who had been learning English since young, could not do it. How could that girl have the ability to communicate with foreigners? Pfft, don't tease me. I don't believe it. Just as Ji Xuetong crossed her arms and looked at Yun Jian and Lawson arrogantly like a white swan, she heard Yun Jian's lips curl. She pursed her lips lightly and then spoke in fluent English. Another round. What? Yun Jian's fluent English and her exquisite accent stunned everyone present. There was a difference between the English spoken by foreigners and the English spoken by Country Z's people. However, Yun Jian's fluent English just now made some of Country Z's own English teachers concede defeat. With that kind of intonation and accent, could this girl have lived abroad for a long time? However, the people present immediately abandoned this thought. After all, Yun Jian was just a schoolmate who came here to participate in the competition. At this moment, the group of people standing beside Yun Jian were also stunned. Lawson was already having a pleasant conversation with Yun Jian. The two of them had been conversing in English. They spoke so fast that everyone present was confused. Some people couldn't understand at all, while others could understand a sentence or two. What is it? Yun Jian, you decide. I'm fine with anything. Lawson said seriously. From the looks of it, he was not going to let go until he defeated Yun Jian. I refuse. Yun Jian continued to speak. Then she glanced at Lawson from the corner of her eyes and could not help but remind him, what's more, it's our foreign language competition now. You're the judge. If we compete with you, what about our foreign language competition? Lawson knocked his head hard when he heard Yun Jian's reminder. Damn it. I forgot that I'm the referee now. Lawson shouted. How could he forget that? Yun Jian rolled her eyes at Lawson. From afar, Ji Xuetong saw that Yun Jian and Lawson's fluent English conversation had attracted everyone's attention and envious gazes. She could not help but grit her teeth. This kind of attention and envious gazes could only belong to her. Coincidentally, the girl standing beside Ji Xuetong could not help but exclaim, "Oh my God, she's so good. She can communicate so smoothly with foreigners. I feel like she's even better than you, Xuetong." The girl suddenly realized that she had said something wrong and quickly covered her mouth. However, to the competitive Ji Xuetong, the girl's words and actions were like needles pricking her ears. Ji Xuetong could not help but bite her lips hard. Chapter 856. With so many people staring at her, Yun Jian naturally could not sense that she was being watched. At that moment, Yun Jian was standing in front of Lawson, urging him to return to his referee's area. Lawson wanted to say more to Yunjian, but he was urged by the teacher who led the team just now when the words were on the tip of his tongue. In the end, Lawson could only look at Yunjian. As he walked away, he could not help but stop and shout at Yunjian, "Yunjian, you must wait for me after the competition ends. It's rare for me to come to Country Z. You must bring me around. You must." Yunjian pursed her lips slightly. Her delicate face was delicate and intriguing. "Okay." Yunjian nodded lightly. Then, Lawson ran back to where he was supposed to be as a referee. Seeing that the show was over, the students who had formed a circle around the competition also left. The foreign language competition soon began. There were more participants in the competition this time. Before the teachers led the students from their respective schools to the competition venue, they had already arranged each student's group. At that moment, all the students present had been arranged into 4 groups. B, C, and D. Class A students were compared to Class A students. It was the same for all the other groups. Class A students were undoubtedly the ones with the best academic results in each school. They started with A's. Once they reached grade D, they would be the students with the worst oral English skills in the school. These groups were arranged by professional English teachers who went to each school to test the students participating in the competition a few days ago. Yunjian's oral English was naturally Class A, so she was placed in Group A. The purpose of this grouping was to speed up the competition. After all, there were more participants. After the order was out, the first group to compete was the Class A. Yunjian was already standing in Group A's queue. She did not see Ning Lanlan, so she guessed that Ning Lanlan was probably not a student in Group A. As for the competition venue, it was the big field of foreign languages middle school. The oral English competition was not a closed competition. During the competition, all the participating students could gather around and watch, but they were not allowed to make a sound. At this time, the students in Group A had already started their competition. The competition was divided into 2 rounds. The first round was to read English. The first round of the competition was very simple. All the contestants had to do was take an English dialogue sheet and read it from beginning to end. Then, the referees would give each student a score based on their level. Yunjian's spoken English was very good, and everyone present had already heard it. Therefore, when Yunjian read out the long conversation smoothly, the people present did not feel the initial shock. With Yunjian as a comparison, Ji Shuatang, who was known as the foreign language prodigy, did not stand out as much. As a result, Ji Shuatang hated Yunjian even more. In the second round of the competition, all the members of Group A would stand together and each of them would choose an opponent for a foreign language exchange battle. The 2 of them would communicate in a foreign language until the other party could no longer speak a foreign language, which meant that they had won. The winner could choose the next opponent, and the loser would fight the loser. The winner could rise all the way to the top. The final 2 winners would fight to determine the first, second, and third place. When the students in Group A chose their opponents, the people around them were very nervous. The 2 people who received the most attention were Ji Shuatang, who was known as the foreign language prodigy, and Yunjian, who could easily converse with foreigners. Chapter 857. Was it that simple and crude? Were the 2 most favored contestants going up against each other right from the start? One had to know that in this round of competition, if she lost to her first opponent, then her ranking would be very low no matter what. It was the same as drawing lots to decide the winner. Only by defeating one's opponent could she continue to challenge other winners. If she couldn't even win the first round, her ranking would definitely not be high. Hence, when Ji Shuatang arrogantly pointed her finger at Yunjian and said that she would choose Yunjian, the crowd went wild. Foreign languages prodigy Ji Shuatang versus Yunjian, who could easily communicate with foreigners. This was undoubtedly the battle that everyone present was looking forward to. Both of them were very good at speaking. Hence, there was a lot of discussion in the crowd. Does it have to be so exciting? The two best contestants are going up against each other right from the start. Who do you think will win? Someone whispered to the people around them. Although the rules stated that no one was allowed to speak, mouths belonged to humans. The teachers naturally couldn't seal the mouths of all the students. Ji Shuatang is Foreign Languages High School's foreign languages prodigy. She was invited to participate in a competition overseas by herself. I heard that she even won the third prize. I think she'll definitely win. That's right, that's right. Although the girl next to her looks prettier than Ji Shuatang and spoke well with the foreigner just now, how can she be compared to our foreign languages prodigy? It's impossible. The surrounding students were gossiping as if they wanted to dig up all the secrets of Ji Shuatang and Yunjian. When she heard the people around her praising Yunjian for being prettier than her, Ji Shuatang clenched her fists even tighter. She wasn't afraid, she was furious. Not only did she want to win today, but she also wanted to teach Yunjian a lesson in front of everyone. She wanted everyone present to see if she, the foreign languages prodigy, was better than this girl who came out of nowhere. Ever since Ji Shuatang pointed her finger at Yunjian and taunted her to pick her, Yunjian could already feel Ji Shuatang's hostility toward her. In response, Yunjian could not help but narrow her eyes. Her pair of exquisite beautiful eyes immediately flashed, and a bright light flashed by. I accept. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Her large black eyes met Ji Shuatang's provocative gaze. Amidst the cheers and excitement of the crowd, the curtains of this battle had been raised. Ji Shuatang and Yunjian had the best oral performance, so the first round of the second round was between the two of them. There is no time limit for the foreign language battle. As long as you don't speak Chinese, you can speak any foreign language of any country. In addition, we will be focusing on English, so please start with English. In addition, if you can't answer the next sentence within 3 seconds, then this person is considered to have lost. One of the judges, who was fat and strong, sat on the bench at the front and announced the rules. The rules of this competition were very simple. As long as they didn't talk in Chinese, they could communicate in a foreign language. However, if one person couldn't answer the other person's question within 3 seconds, that person would lose. Hearing that it was not limited to English and that they could also converse in other languages, Ji Shuatang's arrogant attitude was once again displayed. She could speak 3 foreign languages. In other words, the languages of the 3 kingdoms. Among them, she was best at English. Other than that, she could also converse in simple Japanese and Korean. If that was the case, was Yunjian not going to lose for sure? She, Ji Shuatang, loved the feeling of having victory in her grasp. Who else here could speak 3 foreign languages like her? The answer was, no. Chapter 858. Can we begin? It was then that Yunjian's nonchalant voice rang. She stood in front of the judges while all the teachers and students around her had their eyes on her. Yunjian, however, did not look shy or afraid at all. On the contrary, Yunjian stood with her arms crossed in front of her chest. Her lackadaisical manner caused an uproar among the audience. Was Yunjian not afraid of going up against Ji Shuatang, who was known as the foreign languages prodigy? Or was she already confident of winning? Yes, we can begin. Even the fat and bulky judge was baffled by Yunjian, but he recovered quickly. Now, I announce the start of the competition. The judge announced in his booming voice once he snapped back to reality. Both of you can start with any language you like. Even if you switch to another language halfway through, you must continue the previous question from your opponent, the judge told Yunjian and Ji Shuatang again. Other than Ji Shuatang, there were many teachers who knew a lot of foreign languages. Of course, the main reason why Ji Shuatang stood out was that she was only 16 years old. She had the advantage of being young. Jian Jian. Go for it. Yun Jian heard Ning Lanlan's cheer from the crowd out of the blue. One could still shout before the competition started. Yun Jian looked back. This time, she caught the source of Ning Lanlan's voice and saw Ning Lanlan, who was sitting in the crowd. Yun Jian returned a smile to Ning Lanlan. I'll start first. Ji Shuatang frowned in annoyance when she saw the situation. She had started the match in English. Since Ji Shuatang had started the match in English, the audience boasted and complimented her again. However, Ji Shuatang had already lifted her head to look at Yun Jian like a proud swan. She asked Yun Jian in a provocative English accent, "What do you like to do on the weekends?" It was usually a simple conversation in a foreign language, but the audience's hearts were clenched tightly. "I'll go running on the weekends to strengthen my body." Yun Jian replied to Ji Shuatang in English smoothly. Right after she replied, Yun Jian asked, "What do you usually like to buy with money?" After 3 minutes, Yun Jian and Ji Shuatang's English conversation was evenly matched. Yun Jian had to admit that Ji Shuatang's English was pretty good. Even though her spoken English was a far cry from formal English, Ji Shuatang could always answer her questions within 3 seconds. The two of them were still conversing in English, but at that moment, Ji Shuatang's forehead was already covered in sweat. She felt like she was about to die. He had to end this battle as soon as possible. Ji Shuatang's lips curled into a smirk. "If you had the chance to travel, where would you choose to go?" "Why?" Yun Jian tilted her head and looked up. She crossed her arms in front of her chest lazily, as if she did not care about Ji Shuatang at all. "I'll go to France because it's the city of romance." Ji Shuatang said the first half of her sentence in English. Right after she finished speaking, it was Ji Shuatang's turn to ask Yun Jian a question. She curled her lips and asked in Japanese, which was not very accurate, "Where do you usually travel on the weekends?" Ji Shuatang's sudden use of Japanese made everyone present feel refreshed. Here it comes. This Ji Shuatang was someone who could speak 3 foreign languages. Right after Ji Shuatang asked Yun Jian in Japanese, everyone present was certain that Yun Jian was going to lose this time. That was because no one understood what Ji Shuatang meant. Yun Jian probably did not even understand Japanese, right? How could she answer Ji Shuatang's question? In response, Ji Shuatang raised her head arrogantly and looked sideways at Yun Jian. Ji Shuatang was counting down. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. She was going to lose. Chapter 859. Other than English, foreign languages like Japanese and Korean could not be learned in school. Unless one studied in a foreign language high school, there would be a few teachers who knew other languages. Of course, they would only be taught during some elective classes. Of course, it was impossible for students to learn a foreign language in just a week of elective classes. Yun Jian was a student of Longmeny Junior High School, and there were no teachers in the school who knew other languages besides English. As for Ji Shuatang, she had been practicing with her tutor on the weekends, so she had learned 3 foreign languages. Initially, they thought that Yun Jian would not be able to understand Ji Shuatang speaking to Yun Jian in Japanese. At least at this moment, everyone present was certain that Yun Jian would lose. In the end, they did not expect Yun Jian to know Japanese. Yun Jian could speak Japanese too. Even Lawson, who was sitting in the referee's seat, could not help but straighten his back. The surrounding students, including the referee, all stared at the scene in front of them with wide eyes. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Ji Shuatang, who had vowed that Yun Jian would lose if she waited for 3 seconds, was now staring at Yun Jian in disbelief. The whole place was silent for a few seconds until Yun Jian asked Ji Shuatang in her beautiful Japanese voice, who do you usually hang out with on the weekends? This was a very common conversation in a foreign language. Of course, it was not common when it was spoken in a foreign language. Ji Shuatang immediately recovered from her shock, and a sharp glint flashed across her eyes. I usually stay at home with my parents, Ji Shuatang quickly replied in Japanese. At this moment, the atmosphere in the stadium reached its climax. From an English duel to a Japanese duel, who else could have such ability? After all, most of the people present could only determine which language Ji Shuatang and Yun Jian were speaking based on their accents. At this moment, Ji Shuatang suddenly changed her tone. She switched from Japanese to Korean and asked Yun Jian, "May I ask what star sign you are?" Her Korean was not very fluent. To be honest, Ji Shuatang's Korean was not very good. It was even worse than Japanese. However, for most of the people present who did not speak Korean, Ji Shuatang's pronunciation was already quite accurate and impressive. But now, Yun Jian wouldn't do it, would she? After all, Yun Jian couldn't have learned Korean, right? Even Lawson, who was sitting in the referee's seat, was worried for Yun Jian. Ji Shuatang even raised her proud head once more. She knew it. So what if Yun Jian knew 2 foreign languages? Wasn't this still no match for him? Looking at Ji Shuatang's unyielding face, Yun Jian only smiled coldly. She used to ignore people like Ji Shuatang, but she changed her mind today. Gemini. Yun Jian instantly replied Ji Shuatang in fluent Korean. How was this possible? Why did she know 3 foreign languages? How was this possible? Ji Shuatang was so shocked that she took 2 big steps back. However, just as Ji Shuatang took 2 steps back in shock, Yun Jian's voice was heard again. So, do you want to continue? This time, it was in Russian. Yun Jian pursed her lips and smiled. She continued, "Maybe you could try to communicate with me in French." This was in French. Actually, I don't mind continuing to talk to you in English. This time, it was in Italian. Yun Jian spoke more than 10 languages in one go. The people present could only understand the pronunciation. Some of the languages were unfamiliar to them. Chapter 860. Even the referees who were in charge of hearing incorrectly slammed their tables and stood up in shock. Perhaps some of the students had never heard of the languages Yun Jian spoke before, but the teachers present had a wide range of contacts. They might not be able to understand some of the languages spoken, but they could still determine which language was spoken. It was undeniable that the words that came out of Yun Jian's mouth were in a foreign language. Moreover, Yun Jian spoke the languages of more than 10 countries. Did she start learning foreign languages when she was in her mother's womb? A female teacher who sat in front of the judge's seat bolted up from the table in shock. She looked at Yun Jian, the shock in her eyes clear for everyone to see. Lin. Teacher Lin Dan. A male teacher saw the female referee stand up and couldn't help but call out to her. The female teacher called Teacher Lin Dan stood up and walked towards Yun Jian. She stared with her big round eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. At this moment, Teacher Lin Dan was already in front of Yun Jian. She looked at Yun Jian in disbelief and asked Yun Jian, "Student, you know the languages of more than 10 countries." Everyone present was stunned when they heard Teacher Lin Dan's words. Who was this Teacher Lin Dan? She was the most senior foreign language teacher in Foreign Languages High School. She had mastered 5 foreign languages so far. Even in the entire Zhe province, she could temporarily occupy a position among the teachers. Yun Jian replied Teacher Lin Dan indifferently. Then, she turned her eyes to Ji Shuatang, who was trembling in shock and unable to move. Yun Jian had always been the one to provoke others. No one had ever provoked her, Yun Jian. Therefore, Yun Jian wasn't afraid of exposing her background or being suspected. She looked up and stared straight at Ji Xuetang. Yun Jian's provocative words were the same as Ji Xuetang's. She returned the same provocation back to her. Do you still want to compete? You can choose any language from all over the world. I'm always up for it. After Yun Jian finished speaking, she even blinked. She looked innocent and smiled faintly. Oh right, I forgot to tell you that other than knowing the languages of all over the country, I also know the local languages of some countries. What do you think? Do you want to compete again? I think we can fight for 100 rounds without a problem. If one were to ask why Yun Jian knew so many languages, it was because Yun Jian had traveled all over the country as slaying God in her past life. The missions that she took on assassinations of important people from all over the country. However, in order to kill him, he had to sneak in. And in order to sneak in, he had to learn the local language. Yun Jian was fast and precise. She was able to master the simplest language in the shortest time. Of course, other than foreign languages like English and Chinese that were used more frequently, Yun Jian could only communicate in many other languages. If she were to write these languages down, she might only be able to write a few of them with her standard. Yun Jian's provocative words made everyone burst out in laughter. Soon, there was a flurry of discussion. This is so exciting. This girl knows the languages of a dozen countries. That's amazing. I used to think that Ji Xuetang was the foreign languages prodigy and the best student in Longmen City. I didn't expect that there would always be someone better than her. Now that this girl is here, the foreign languages prodigy Ji Xuetang isn't even fit to carry her shoes. That's right. Ji Xuetang and I are in the same school. When she was crowned as the foreign languages prodigy, she was so smug like she was invincible in the universe. Let's see how she can still be so smug now. Chapter 861. Ji Xuetang did not have a good relationship with others. Due to her arrogant personality in the past, many people disapproved of her. Yun Jian's actions were like a tight slap to Ji Xuetang's face. Some of the students almost stood up and cheered when they saw that. Ji Xuetang's face turned pale instantly when she heard the people's comments about her. Yun Jian only found it funny. In the end, the judges announced that Yun Jian had defeated Ji Xuetang. Ji Xuetang left the stage with a pale face. She claimed that she was not feeling well and left without participating in the rest of the competition. Apart from that, Yun Jian's opponent could only admit that they were unlucky. What a joke. Yun Jian knew more than 10 foreign languages. If they were not unlucky to go up against her, what was? The judges announced the results on the spot when the members of Group A were done with their competition. Naturally, the first place went to Yun Jian. However, Yun Jian did not feel proud or complacent at all. Therefore, many of the students were impressed by Yun Jian. The junior division's competition was divided into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. Once Group A's competition ended, there was nothing for them to do. However, since there were students from Longmanyjiang among the 4 groups, Yun Jian had to stay here and wait for Group D's competition to end before she could return to Longmanyjiang with the rest of the students. She had nothing to do during this period. Ning Lanlan was in Group B. Yun Jian waited for Ning Lanlan's competition to end before sneaking off with her from the junior division to the senior division. Yun Jian was going to look for Yun Yi. When Ning Lanlan heard that Yun Jian was going to look for someone in the senior division, she blushed instantly. In the end, Ning Lanlan stammered and said that she knew a senior from the senior division. Ning Lanlan was a student from Foreign Languages High School. Yun Jian told her that while they were walking and chatting. As Ning Lanlan was a student of Foreign Languages High School, she knew the route very well. With Ning Lanlan leading the way, Yun Jian soon arrived at the senior section from the junior section of Foreign Languages High School. Because Yun Yi was a high school student, even if they came to participate in the competition would be held in the High School of Foreign Languages High School. Jian, we can't go over here. There's a wall between the junior and senior sections. The teachers usually forbid junior section students from going to the senior section too. Ning Lanlan said dejectedly. However, as soon as she said that, Ning Lanlan suddenly pulled herself together. She looked at Yun Jian and said, "Right, we can sneak a few glances at the fence of the basketball court. I should be able to see something." The word "secretly" made Yun Jian curl her lips. Meanwhile, Yun Jian had brought Ning Lanlan to the junction between the junior and senior sections of Foreign Languages High School. In front of them was a wall that was more than 2 meters high. Yun Jian pointed at the wall and asked Ning Lanlan from the back, "Is the high school section through here?" Ning Lanlan nodded, a little scared yet a little excited. "Yeah. Come on." Yun Jian hinted at Ning Lanlan with her hand, then pointed at the wall and asked, "Do you know how to climb walls?" Ning Lanlan looked at the wall that was more than 2 meters high and shook her head with a shudder. "Give me your hand," Yun Jian said with a squint. Ning Lanlan was suspicious, but she still handed her hand to Yun Jian obediently. Just as she passed her hand to Yun Jian pulled her hand and dashed toward the wall. Ning Lanlan was so scared that her soul almost flew out of her body. When Yun Jian pulled her hand toward the wall and they were about to crash into it, Yun Jian suddenly wrapped her arms around Ning Lanlan's slim waist and leaped with both feet on the ground. Chapter 862. On the other side of the wall, a group of teenagers was running at full speed. They were about 17 or 18 years old, probably in high school. They were currently playing basketball on the basketball court. Foreign Languages High School's high school basketball court was just over there. In fact, there was a fence not far away. Looking through the fence, some boys from the high school could be seen playing basketball. "Jiming, quick! Pass the basketball to me." The teenagers running on the basketball court were doing vigorous exercises. They were drenched in sweat. Even though it was spring before summer, some of the boys had taken off their shirts to show off, revealing their muscular upper bodies. There were some girls sitting around them. They were currently watching the teenagers on the basketball court with intense screams. "Ah!" It was also at this moment that a sharp scream rang out, and at the same time, it was heard clearly by everyone present. The teenagers who were running on the basketball court looked at the high school's wall at the same time. All they saw were 2 heads on the wall all of a sudden. In the distance, some of the girls who were watching the group of teenagers running on the basketball court suddenly saw 2 heads appear on the wall. At this moment, they were so scared that they screamed out loud. The group of youths who were still running on the basketball court all stopped in their tracks. "Don't scream." Yun Jian was holding on to the top of the wall with one hand, preventing her and Ning Lanlan from sliding down. Ning Lanlan shut her mouth as soon as she heard Yun Jian's voice. In the next second, Ning Lanlan felt Yun Jian stomp hard on the wall they were hanging on. She felt Yun Jian using the momentum to push both of their bodies against the wall. "Ah!" Ning Lanlan shrieked uncontrollably. However, she quickly covered her mouth when she realized what had happened. The youths who were running on the basketball court and even the girls who saw Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan's heads from afar only saw that Yun Jian leaped off the wall while carrying Ning Lanlan. Even though she was carrying Ning Lanlan, Yun Jian's speed and movements were enough to astonish everyone present. The teenagers who were playing basketball held their breaths in shock. One of the youths looked at Yun Jian and exclaimed in shock, "My God, this girl is amazing," before Ning Lanlan, who had just returned to her senses, could react. A male voice called out to her, "Lanlan. Why are you here?" Ning Lanlan lifted her head abruptly when she heard the voice. When she saw the boy's face clearly, she shouted in shock, Senior Jiming." The moment Yun Jian heard the tone, she knew that the boy whom Ning Lanlan addressed as Senior Jiming was most likely the senior whom Ning Lanlan had mentioned to her before. It was only then that Xiao Jiming glanced at Ning Lanlan and Yun Jian. His lips curled slightly as he asked, "You guys climbed over the wall?" "Jian Jian brought me here," Ning Lanlan said after she came to her senses. "Hey, Jiming, when did you get to know these two beauties?" "What? Why don't you introduce them to me?" Just as Xiao Jiming and Ning Lanlan exchanged a few words, a ruffian-looking boy came over to put an arm around Xiao Jiming's shoulders and asked, "Hi, I'm Ning Lanlan. This is my friend, Yun Jian. We're here to look for Jinjian's brother. He's a student who's here to participate in your high school's foreign language competition." Ning Lanlan told the ruffian-looking boy. "Oh, it's a foreign language competition. That's easy, we'll take you there," the ruffian-looking boy said at once. The ruffian-looking boy then turned to Yun Jian. His face was filled with teasing. Chapter 863. Yun Jian did not even bother with the ruffian-looking guy, which made him very upset. When Yun Jian walked forward with Ning Lanlan, one of the guys standing beside the basketball hoop mocked the ruffian-looking guy, "Shan Zihao, ha ha ha, I didn't expect you to be ignored by a girl." The ruffian-looking guy's name was Shan Zihao. He was thin and lean, the type that girls liked. He was quite tall, about 1.78 meters, with short black hair. He looked like the type that young girls liked. However, Yun Jian did not even bother with him, which shocked Shan Zihao. He had never been disliked by a girl like that before. Hee, interesting, this girl is really interesting. "Hey, babes, don't walk so fast. I'll bring you over there." Shan Zihao took off his clothes from the basketball hoop, thinking that he looked cool. He then ran after Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. Meanwhile, the senior that Ning Lanlan knew, Xiao Jiming, was already leading the way for Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. Xiao Jiming was the kind of person who looked gentle. He did not usually like to show off his abilities. Just like the group of young men led by Shan Zihao who liked to show off in front of the girls without their upper bodies. Xiao Jiming's appearance was indeed handsome, and he was also the type that was quite popular among girls. However, his character was extremely gentle and refined, and he treated people very modestly. Xiao Jiming was standing next to Ning Lanlan, leading the way for Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. When Shan Zihao saw this, he quickly ran over and hugged Xiao Jiming's shoulders from behind like a brother hugging a brother. "Hey, I'll go with you guys." Shan Zihao was not like Xiao Jiming. He obviously followed them because he wanted to pick up girls. On the other hand, Xiao Jiming only brought Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan over because he wanted to show them the way. "Shan Zihao, why are you joining in the fun? We're missing 2 people now. Are we not playing anymore?" The few young men who were playing basketball did not follow them. However, one of them shouted at Shan Zihao. "I'm not playing anymore, I'm going to join in the fun." Shan Zi laughed and waved his hand. However, Yun Jian didn't care about Shan Zihao at all. Shan Zihao was walking on Xiao Jiming's left. Ning Lanlan was on Xiao Jiming's right while Yun Jian was on Ning Lanlan's right. The 4 of them stood side by side, but Yun Jian didn't say much at all. "The foreign language competition is up ahead," Xiao Jiming said. Xiao Jiming did not participate in the foreign language competition. They were only in PE class now. However, many students from foreign languages high school would rush over to watch the competition after class. Therefore, Xiao Jiming and the others could move around freely. Ning Lanlan lowered her head and nodded shyly. Yun Jian, who was standing by the side, could tell with a single glance that Ning Lanlan was most likely interested in Xiao Jiming. However, Yun Jian didn't think too much about it. At this moment, they had arrived at the foreign language competition venue of the high school. It was all so crowded here. Yun Jian looked around for a long time but did not see her brother. However, she saw a familiar face. Su Haokol. Yun Jian's lips curled up slightly. As long as she found Su Haokol, it meant that Yuni must be nearby. This was because Su Haokol was Yun Jian's best buddy. Su Haokol was also Su Zetian's son. Before Yun Jian walked over, she saw that Su Haokol had noticed her as well. Chapter 864. Su Haokol walked over with a hearty smile on his face. Yun Jian met his face. She returned his smile without losing any of her poise. I'm here to look for my brother. After a pause, Yun Jian asked again, where's my brother? Yuni must be with Su Haokol. Yun Jian was certain of that. Yi went to the toilet. I'm waiting for him here. The competition is starting soon, Su Haokol said simply to Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded. Su Haokol was Su Zetian's son. Su Zetian was currently managing Falcon Hall on behalf of Yun Jian. Some time ago, Su Zetian was severely injured and handed Falcon Hall over to Duan Lei to manage. At that thought, Yun Jian asked Su Haokol, how's your father's recovery coming along? Little sister Yuni knows about my father's injuries. Su Haokol was slightly shocked. Although Su Haokol was Su Zetian's son, he knew that his father's Dragon Head gang had been taken over by a woman named Rakshasa and was renamed Falcon Hall. However, Su Haokol had never heard Su Zetian mention who the current boss of Falcon Hall was. Moreover, he did not know if he knew that Yun Jian was the current boss of Falcon Hall. Su Zetian didn't reveal a single thing to his son. Hence, when Su Haokol heard Yun Jian ask about his father's injuries, he was stunned for a while. However, Su Haokol was stunned for a while, but still nodded in confusion. Dad's much better now. He's almost recovered. Even Su Haokol was stunned, let alone Ning Lanlan and the others. Which teenage girl would ask about her father's injuries directly when meeting someone she knew? Yun Jian's actions made it hard for others not to overthink. However, Yun Jian wasn't bothered at all. She pointed at Ning Lanlan and introduced her to Su Haokol. She's my friend, Ning Lanlan. Then, everyone present got to know each other. However, not only did Ning Lanlan remember Yun Jian asking about Su Haokol's father's injury, but even Xiao Zhiming and Shan Zihao remembered it. Shan Zihao almost blurted out the question. Why did Yun Jian care about someone else's father? But in the end, Shan Zihao held back. It had to be said that Yun Jian gave Shan Zihao a good first impression. However, Shan Zihao couldn't help but feel a little suspicious after hearing what he said. Could it be that Yun Jian had an affair with Su Haokol's father? Just as she thought about it, a voice familiar to Yun Jian rang. Xiao Jian. When she snapped back to reality, it was Yun Yi who was walking over from the washroom. Go. Yun Jian grinned and introduced himself to Ning Lanlan and the others. Once everyone was familiar with each other, she strolled to the center of the competition area. When she saw Yun Yi, Yun Jian could not help whispering to him that Qing Yu was coming back soon. When Yun Yi heard Yun Jian say that Qing Yu was coming back, a glint flashed across his deep eyes. There was no need to mention how excited he looked. Qing Yu had been spending time with her parents in her hometown recently. Now that she was coming back, of course, Yun Yi was delighted. My parents will come and cheer for me. Su Haokol had just received a call and came back excitedly. For those who were about to start the competition, it was undoubtedly the happiest thing to have their family by their side. There was no other. Once he heard that Su Haokol's parents were coming, Shan Zihao's dark eyes flickered as he turned to look at Yun Jian. Shan Zihao had thought that Yun Jian might be having an affair with Su Haokol's father. After all, it was a little unreasonable for a girl to ask if someone's father was okay. Chapter 865. Comparatively speaking, Su Hao's current mood was simply indescribable with excitement. When Su Zetian was the boss of Longmen City's top mafia group, Su Haokol dared not reveal the news to his friends. When Yuni found out later that Yuni treated him like a brother instead of distancing himself from him, it was impossible for Su Haokol not to be touched. What outsiders did not know was that Su Haokol yearned for his father's love and care. Su Haokol had known since he was young that his father would not appear in public. His father's birthday banquet was even used by Su Zetian as a meal to better bond with his father. What more the usual occasions? Su Haokol's results were excellent. Although he had the capital to get in through the back door, Su Haokol and Yuni had both gotten into DE high school with their own abilities. He did not want to use his father's status as the boss of Longmen City. However, everything seemed to have changed after Dragon Head Gang was taken away by the woman named Slang Luo. His father was still the boss of Falcon Hall, but now his father had much more free time than before. Since his father was heavily injured recently, Falcon Hall's boss, Slang Luo, had given his father a long vacation. Su Haokol was very happy now because he had hoped that his parents could be by his side. Now, his parents could even take time out to visit him. Su Haokol was very grateful to Slang Luo of Falcon Hall. If Slang Luo were to stand in front of him now, he would definitely thank her profusely. Isn't that a good thing? Haha. Yuni was in high spirits as well, wrapping his arm around Su Haokol's shoulder joyfully. Su Haokol nodded solemnly as he looked at his good buddy who was willing to talk about anything. Yun Jian smiled faintly as she stood on the side. When she smiled, the scenery around her seemed to brighten up for her. Shan Zihao could not help being dumbfounded. However, once he thought that Yun Jian might really be having an affair with Su Haokol's father, his gaze darkened. He wanted to see what kind of person Su Haokol's father was. They're here, they're here. Su Haokol said excitedly to Yun Yi with his phone in hand. Sure. Just as Su Haokol was about to look around with his phone, a mature female voice called out. Yun Jian, Su Haokol, and the others' head, Su Zetian was slowly walking over with his wife's support. Su Zetian's injuries were much better now. It wouldn't be long before he would be able to fully recover. Dad. Mom. When he saw his father, Luo's father and his mother, his father's and Luo, his mother and Luo, asked for him. In the blink of an eye, Su Zetian and Lin Wanru were already in front of the group. Su Zetian merely nodded at Su Haokol. Lin Wanru came over to stroke Su Haokol's head with the motherly love of a woman. In spite of it, Su Zetian froze the moment he saw Yun Jian. This scene was seen by Shan Zihao, who was extremely sensitive, and he was taken aback. Was this person Su Haokol's father? Moreover, seeing how Su Zetian froze when he saw Yun Jian, Shan Zihao was even more suspicious that there was something going on between them. Just as Shan Zihao thought about it, Su Zetian's surprised voice called out to Yun Jian, Sister Jian. Why are you here? Chapter 866. Just as Su Zetian called out to Sister Jian, Lin Wanru, who was holding his arm and supporting him, turned her head. Lin Wanru was a very virtuous wife. She was very responsible. When she heard that Su Zetian was in trouble, she was scared out of her wits. It was just that Yun Jian saved Su Zetian later. Therefore, Lin Wanru was immensely grateful to Yun Jian. Su Haokol's father actually called Yun Jian Sister Jian. Called Yun Jian sister. Why was that? Shan Zihao's impure thoughts were tossed to the back of his mind as he stared blankly. Shan Zihao even wanted to slap himself. Su Haokol's father called Yun Jian Sister Jian in such a respectful tone. How could he possibly have an impure relationship with Yun Jian? Moreover, Lin Wanru's subsequent behavior further proved this point. Su Zetian could walk on his own without being helped. Therefore, when Lin Wanru saw Yunjian, she let go of Su Zetian's hand and went to Yunjian. Looking at Yunjian, she spoke to Yunjian in a very respectful tone. "It's you. Do you know my Jia?" Before Yunjian could speak, Su Haokol was already asking Lin Wanru in confusion, "Mom, she's my friend's younger sister." Lin Wanru was already holding Yunjian's hand in a friendly manner as she looked at Yunjian and said, "I see. I'm really grateful to you back then. I didn't expect you to be the younger sister of my Zhi's friend." Lin Wanru went on to thank Yunjian, but other than Su Zetian, everyone else present was baffled and had no idea what was going on. Although the people present were dumbfounded, they could still make out the gist of it. There was a high chance that Yunjian had helped Lin Wanru and Su Zetian in some big deal. No matter how they guessed, no one would have guessed that Yunjian was Su Zetian's boss and that it was Yunjian who had saved Su Zetian from the jaws of death when he was seriously injured. She was practically a lifesaver. Lin Wanru held Yunjian's hand and thanked her profusely. Yunjian nodded nonchalantly until an announcement came from the broadcast: "Students, please gather at the competition venue. The foreign language competition is about to begin." Once they heard that, Yun-Yi and Su Haokol hurried to the venue. "Dad, Mom, Sister, come with us. The competition is starting. Will be starting in a while. You can watch us from there," explained Su Haokol, and Yun-Yi then led their group to the venue. With Yunjian and Yuns, and they. Yunjian followed them. When they arrived at the competition venue, there were fewer people here than in the junior department, but there was still a lot of traffic. Not long after Yunjian stood there, she caught sight of a familiar face in the blink of an eye. "Mr. Peter." She saw that Peter was talking to Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in the distance. Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School looked very respectful to Peter, and Peter also put his hands behind his back. His skin was delicate, and there was a hint of handsomeness between his eyebrows. His nose was straight, and he looked like a mixed blood. Wasn't Mr. Peter the thief who stole the antiques from Jia province last time? What? Did he steal them to the school? Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Peter even put on a serious posture and walked side by side with Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School. He had just turned a corner when he saw Yunjian, who was looking at him with narrowed eyes. Peter was still striding forward, but when he saw Yunjian, he was so scared that he lost his footing and sprained his left foot. Chapter 867. Peter had been talking to Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in a serious manner just now. Moreover, Peter had been praised by Principal Zhang. Pete, who was still drowning in the praises just now, was flummoxed the moment he saw Yunjian. Peter sprained his ankle, but he did not care about the pain at all. He looked at Yunjian with fear in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Yunjian would charge at him. Meanwhile, Peter said to Principal Zhang, Principal Zhang, I'm leaving now. Let's talk about this next time." "Hey, Mr. Peter." Principal Zhang had just opened his mouth when he saw Peter had already turned around and was about to run to the school building. Principal Zhang was a little surprised. Seeing that Peter was about to run to the school building, he was even more suspicious. Why is Mr. Peter running to the school building when he's leaving? Shouldn't he be heading to the school gate? Just as Principal Zhang was thinking about that, a teenage girl around 16 years old suddenly walked up to him. She stood in front of everyone and shouted at Peter's back, "Peter, where do you think you're going?" Yun-Yi and Su Haokol, who had yet to gather at the competition venue, were stunned. Shan Zihao and Xiao Jiming, who had been on the basketball team since the beginning, were stunned. Ning Lanlan was completely dumbfounded. Su Zetian and his wife, Lin Wanru, were also looking at Yunjian, who was walking toward Peter, with bewilderment. The group of people was dumbfounded as they watched Yunjian call out to Peter. Why is Yunjian calling out to him again? Does he know her? The people present were stunned because of bewilderment. Shan Zihao's eyes narrowed even more when he saw Yun Jian taking a step forward to stop Peter. What does she want? However, no matter what, Shan Zihao, felt that his interest in her was growing. Meanwhile, everyone saw Peter stop in his tracks from afar. Peter's feet came to a sudden halt. He wanted to slip away, but Yun Jian called out to him. Peter also knew that if he didn't stop, with Yun Jian's strength, she would definitely catch up to him. Peter, on the other hand, was one of the best thieves in the world. He was not afraid of anything except Yun Jian. The antique that was stolen in Jia province last time was recovered by Yun Jian. Madhav *Ker, why is she everywhere? Peter slowly turned his head and smiled at Yun Jian, but it was a forced and bitter smile. Hey. What a coincidence, we meet again. Peter looked at Yun Jian with a smile that was more awkward than crying. If he had known that Yun Jian would be here today, he wouldn't have come even if he was beaten to death. No, it's just a coincidence. As Yun Jian spoke, she had already arrived in front of Peter. The people watching from afar were a little suspicious. Yun Jian was acquainted with this man. Yun Yi, Su Haokol, Su Zitian, Zhang Zihao, and the others were just thinking about it. Even Principal Zhang was a little confused as to why Peter, who was full of confidence just now, would talk to Yun Jian in such a scared tone. Peter suddenly changed his tone. He looked at Yun Jian, and in the next second, he clasped his hands together and bent over to look at Yun Jian with a comical and begging posture. Oh my God, I beg you to forgive me. The thing you wanted last time was something I obtained with great difficulty, and I've already given it to you. I really don't have anything on me now, so please let me go, huh? Oh my God, because of you, I'm about to go begging on the streets. Peter, a grown man, actually begged for mercy in front of Yun Jian. The people present were confused and shocked. Chapter 868. As an international master thief, Peter's stealing skills were exceptionally high. His nimble skills could be considered as one of the best in the world. It could be said that he had only been robbed twice since he debuted. Both times, it was because of Yun Jian. The first time was because of Yun Jian in his past life, and the other time was the theft of antiques in Jia province not long ago. Both times, Yun Jian had recovered the stolen items. Peter had promised his employer that he could steal the items, and his employer had even paid a deposit. Because of Yun Jian's interference, not only did Peter fail to complete his mission, he even had to pay 10 times the penalty. 10 times the penalty was as high as hundreds of millions of US dollars. Therefore, to Peter, the scariest thing in his life was not encountering a ghost but encountering Yun Jian. That was why Peter wanted to slip away the moment he saw Yun Jian. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to run into Yun Jian here. It was scarier than being caught absent-mindedly in class. Did you do something bad again? Yun Jian narrowed her eyes at Peter and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Her relaxed posture made Peter's heart clench. No. How could I? Do I dare? Peter spoke fluent Chinese, but it wasn't hard to see that Peter was a mixed race. One of his parents was probably from country Z. Please let me go. I have parents and children to take care of. I really didn't do anything bad this time. Can you do me a favor and not harass me? Peter's fear of Yun Jian had reached a whole new level. He kept calling her grand aunt, which made Yun Jian dizzy. Yun Jian was not here to cause trouble for Peter. She was just surprised to see him here and wanted to go over to greet him. She did not expect Peter to avoid her like the plague, so Yun Jian called out to him playfully. Xiao Jian, what's this? At this moment, Yun Yi and the others had also followed Yun Jian over. They looked at the scene in front of them in shock. Old friend, Yun Jian said readily. My dear mother, great aunt, I don't dare to be friends with you. Peter was a straightforward person. He made an exaggerated gesture. His fear of Yun Jian was exaggerated and comical. Why was he so afraid of Yun Jian? Yun Jian was not a river beast. Yun Yi and Su Haokol were not the only ones who were shocked. Ning Lanlan, Xiao Zhiming, and Shan Zihao, in particular, could not be more stunned. If Yun Jian looked so scary, then, just as everyone thought of this, they saw Principal Zhang standing in front of Yun Jian. Principal Zhang paused before speaking to Yun Jian. "Student, I don't know which school you're from, but I can assure you that Mr. Peter isn't a bad person. Not only am I the principal of Foreign Languages High School, but I'm also the president of Dragon Gate Charity Organization and the director of Huiyan Orphanage. There are too many children in this world who are suffering from despair and pain. They're orphans and have no one to rely on. Some of them can't even feed themselves 3 times a day. Huiyan Orphanage has adopted a large number of such children. They don't have a source of income, so even food and clothing are a problem. In recent years, however, it's Mr. Peter who's donated a large sum of money to Huiyan Orphanage every month to help the children grow up. We and the children are very grateful to him." Chapter 869. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes at Principal Zhang's righteous words that were filled with reverence for Peter. She was stunned for 2 seconds as well. Who would have thought that Peter had stolen so many cultural relics and earned so much money just to donate them? It was no wonder Peter looked so pathetic every time. According to what Yun Jian knew, Peter accepted all kinds of missions. With Peter's capability, how could he be so poor that he would accept the lowest level of theft? When Yun Jian saw him in the past, Peter had always made himself poor. Yun Jian was skeptical. Peter was an international thief after all. Where did he spend all the money he earned all these years and spend it all so quickly? He even made himself look like a poor man. Now, Yun Jian knew. "You're quite capable." Yun Jian smiled faintly and even flashed her pearly white teeth at Peter. "We're old friends. Why don't we go for a walk?" Peter was stunned for 2 seconds. Was he seeing things? Did he just see a friendly gaze in Yun Jian's eyes? "Oh, okay." For some reason, Peter agreed to Yun Jian's request. Once he agreed, however, he regretted it immediately. He was freaking terrified of Yun Jian. The few times he saw Yun Jian, he was always tortured by Yun Jian. The last time they met, Yun Jian had even snatched the antique he had risked his life to get. "Xiao Jian, Zhe and I are going for the competition." They could not forget about the competition. Yuni looked at Yun Jian. He had no idea how Yun Jian knew Peter, but the latter did not look like a bad guy, so he followed Su Haokol to the competition venue without worry. Shan Zihao and the others were dumbfounded by what they saw. Yun Jian then started chatting with Peter. Su Zitian and Lin Wanru had already followed them to watch Su Haokol's competition. After the few of them left, only Ning Lanlan, Xiao Zhiming, and Shan Zihao were left in the area. Principal Zhang also left later because he had something to do. Coincidentally, it wasn't easy for Ning Lanlan and Xiao Zhiming to meet each other. The two of them chatted happily. Thus, the only person who stood beside Yun Jian and Peter to listen to their conversation was Shan Zihao. Shan Zihao already had a good impression of Yun Jian. Now that he saw how friendly Yun Jian was with Peter, he felt slightly displeased. But at this moment, Shan Zihao was completely ignored. He could only stand aside and listen. He stood there like a ruffian, but he didn't leave. After Yun Jian and Peter calmed down and chatted for a while, she realized that Peter's character was actually quite good. Especially Peter, after talking to Yun Jian, his fear of Yun Jian was reduced by 2 points. "Hey, Grandaunt, so your house is in Longmen City." Peter did not realize that he did not know Yun Jian's name and was still addressing Yun Jian as Grandaunt. "I'm Yun Jian." If I hear her grandaunt again, I'll snatch your stuff again, Yunjian smirked and said as if she was threatening Peter. Damn, grandaunt, you. No, no, Yunjian, don't snatch my stuff. If it weren't for you, I, Peter, would still be the holder of 0 failures in the underworld. I might even be awarded a big prize one day. Peter struck a narcissistic pose and told Yunjian. Yunjian and Peter got into the conversation as they chatted. Shan Zihao, on the other hand, had no idea what was going on. He had no idea what Yunjian and Peter were talking about. Snatch his stuff. What holder of 0 failures in the underworld? Chapter 870. However, the more mysterious Yunjian became, the more Shan Zihao wanted to dig out Yunjian's secrets. All in all, Shan Zihao's interest in Yunjian was growing. Yunjian pressed her lips together and smiled softly at Peter's amusing words. Not anymore. Yunjian then looked up at Peter. What about you? Why did you appear in Longmen City? Me. Peter chuckled at the mention of himself and pointed at himself with a smile. My grandma is from Longmen City. I got lost when I was young and spent my time in the orphanage. The hard days in the orphanage weren't even 1,000th of what came after, but to me, the unbearable hunger was the hardest time of my life. Since then, I've donated all the money I earned to the orphanage. Longmen City is my grandma's hometown, of course, I have to give priority to the donation. Peter shrugged and continued in a gloomy tone, actually, my mother came from the Huiyan orphanage. She got sick from starvation when she was young, so she died of cancer at a young age. When I found her home, she was already gone. Only my grandma was left at home. When Peter's grandmother was young, they were poor and had many children. Even food was a problem for the family when they could not afford to eat. Helpless, they could only send Peter's mother to Huiyan orphanage, hoping that she could survive. Huiyan orphanage had little to eat and the children grew up hungry. Peter's mother grew up and became successful. She met Peter's father when she was traveling abroad. Peter's father was from country Y, but Peter's mother insisted on being with him despite the hardships of a foreign relationship. They could have lived happily together as a family. However, Peter's mother fell sick. It was a terminal illness due to starvation in the orphanage when she was young. Peter's mother passed away not long after. Peter's grandmother was a snobbish person. She had always thought that Peter's mother was not good enough for Peter's father. Therefore, when Peter's mother passed away and Peter's father was dispirited, his grandmother sent Peter to an orphanage in country Z. Peter spent an indescribable time in the orphanage. Later on, Peter was taken away by an old master and was taught the old master's lifelong skills of stealing. Through Peter's own hard work, he became the current international thief, Mr. Peter. In fact, Pete was a ZY hybrid. Of course, Peter didn't say that he was a thief in front of Shan Zihao. He just made a rough summary and summarized the whole story with a similar story. After listening to Peter's story, Yunjian was slightly shaken. Not to mention Shan Zihao. At this moment, Shan Zihao sympathized with Peter. However, it had to be said that Peter was a talent. Perhaps the thieving skills that Peter's master had taught him could only help him become one of the best thieving masters in the country. This had something to do with talent. At the very least, Peter was able to become a world-class master thief because of his own efforts. When Shan Zihao saw Yunjian listening to Peter's touching story, he felt that girls would usually cry after hearing such a touching story. However, when Shan Zihao turned his gaze to Yunjian, he saw Yunjian looking at Peter and saying something completely different from what Shan Zihao had imagined. Follow me and you can set the salary. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Her confident look surprised Shan Zihao. Chapter 871. Work with her. What for? What could he do by following her? These were Shan Zihao's thoughts. Shan Ziheo's current state of mind was indescribable. Yun Jian's actions were getting more mysterious. Of course, the more mysterious Yun Jian was, the more Shan Ziheo's interest in Yun Jian grew. Humans were all despicable, especially those like Shan Ziheo who lived like a prince. In foreign languages high school, Shan Ziheo was no doubt the target of girls' adoration. Not only was he handsome and pleasing to the eyes, but he also had the cool personality that girls liked. It was rare for him to meet a girl like Yun Jian. Not only did Yun Jian ignore him in the beginning, the sense of mystery she exuded had only intensified since the beginning. She brought Ning Lon Lon over the wall, her unusual skills, Su Haokole's father calling her Sister Jian, and the fact that Peter, a mixed blood, was so fearful of her. Shan Ziheo's interest was gradually piqued as he listened to these stories. The more unobtainable something was, the more one wanted to explore it. Shan Ziheo was probably the epitome of this saying. It was then that Peter cried out in shock. "Work with you. I can set my salary. For real." Peter scanned Yun Jian from head to toe. After all, Yun Jian gave him a terrifying vibe. When Yun Jian robbed him of his stolen items, it was no different from robbing him of his money. Now, Yun Jian was telling him to work with her and set his salary as he pleased. To Peter, he was already extremely lucky that Yun Jian did not steal his things. Now, she was asking him to work for her. "I'm not joking. I just want an answer from you. Do you agree or not?" Yun Jian crossed her arms in front of her chest. She was not in a hurry for Peter's answer. Peter kept quiet for a while. It was only when Yun Jian spoke again that he snapped back to reality. "Of course. As long as you agree, I'll send someone to get you out of Fox Hunter's control immediately." Peter had signed a long-term contract with Fox Hunters. As an international thief, he naturally had a backer. The Fox Hunting Organization was an internationally renowned organization of thieves. The reason why the Fox Hunting Organization was called a thief organization was because it was different from the Enrich organization and the Kosha mercenaries. The Fox Hunting Organization had a quirk, which was that they only accepted things that their employers wanted to steal or treasures that they wanted to find. Other than that, it never accepted missions that involved killing people. It could be said that the Fox Hunting Organization was the concentration camp for Peter and his group of thieves. Therefore, the Fox Hunting Organization, the Enrich organization, and the Kosha mercenaries did not have any conflicts of interest. However, Yun Jian knew that Peter had signed a 10-year contract with the Fox Hunting Organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, Peter would work for the Fox Hunting Organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, all the missions he took on would have to go through the Fox Hunting Organization. Furthermore, during this period, half of the money he earned would have to be shared with the Fox Hunting Organization. Under such circumstances, Peter really wanted to get rid of the Fox Hunting Organization. Yun Jian's words were more tempting than anything else. As expected, the moment Yun Jian finished her words, Peter's eyes lit up. He looked at Yun Jian with a very excited gaze. "Really? You can really help me get rid of the Fox Hunting Organization? Are you willing to work for me?" Yun Jian did not give Peter a definite answer. She only repeated her previous question. "Yes, yes, yes." Peter nodded his head like a rattledrum. Shan Ziheo, who was standing at the side, saw this. He looked at Yun Jian and Peter with even more shock than before. Chapter 872. Of course, Shan Ziheo had never heard of the Fox Hunting Organization. The Fox Hunting Organization was a highly skilled thief organization, but there was something different about it. The Fox Hunting Organization was different from the Enrich organization and the Kosha mercenaries. The appearance of large organizations like the Enrich organization and the Kosha mercenaries would cause an uproar. Even organizations like the Enrich organization and the Kosha mercenaries were often published in the major international newspapers and magazines in country M. They were listed by many businessmen and politicians as a force to be reckoned with. However, the fox hunting organization was different. Very few people in the underworld knew about the fox hunting organization, and only those collectors who loved collecting antiques would find out about the fox hunting organization's whereabouts. Because the fox hunting organization was only involved in stealing, the members of the organization were only in charge of stealing. Moreover, the fox hunting organization had never been publicized, but it had a place in the international community. In short, those who knew about the fox hunting organization had to have great influence and status in the international community. In other words, if you didn't have power and influence, you wouldn't even know about the existence of the fox hunting organization. Therefore, Yun Jian wasn't afraid to speak about the fox hunting organization in front of Shan Zihao. If it was said that Peter was fearful of Yun Jian at the beginning, then at this moment, he was full of expectations for Yun Jian. He was very much looking forward to Yun Jian helping him break free from the fox hunting organization's control. Moreover, he could tell from the fact that Yun Jian had stolen from the famous thief. Yun Jian definitely wasn't someone who lacked money, so Peter immediately agreed to Yun Jian's request. Okay. Yun Jian seemed to know that Peter would agree to her request, so she just nodded. 2 seconds later, she spoke to Peter in fluent Hindi. 2 days later, report to the Kosha mercenaries. Look for the Kosha mercenaries' snake. Tell them that it was Yun Jian who told you. Yun Jian spoke to Peter in Hindi, and her sudden change of language stunned Shan Zihao. Then, Yun Jian switched back to Chinese. I believe you can find its address. Of course, as she was referring to the Kosha mercenaries. Yun Jian pursed her lips into a half-smile. There was an unfathomable sweetness in her smile. Peter obviously understood Hindustani, not to mention that Yun Jian spoke Hindustani for Peter to understand. Furthermore, Yun Jian's main purpose was to prevent Shan Zihao from understanding that sentence. However, after Yun Jian said that sentence, Shan Zihao couldn't figure it out. He looked at the interaction between Yun Jian and Peter and couldn't help but ask Yun Jian, "What language were you speaking just now? Why can't I understand what you're saying?" Yun Jian glanced at Shan Zihao, who was standing by the side. Only now did she remember that there was someone like Shan Zihao by her side. Hearing Shan Zihao's question, Yun Jian only glanced at him slightly, then calmly replied with 3 words, Hindi. Yun Jian didn't even bother to reply to Shan Zihao. Then, Yun Jian shifted her gaze to Peter. Peter was stunned for a few seconds. Kosha mercenaries. Looking for snake. Lizard. Then what was Yun Jian's identity? Fortunately, Peter was slow enough, so he didn't immediately understand the stakes involved. Okay. Peter nodded and said to Yun Jian. Then I'll leave you to it. I'm going to watch my brother's match, Yun Jian said. Okay. Peter didn't even realize that he had been poached by Yun Jian. He was still thinking about the relationship between Yun Jian and the Kosha mercenaries. Chapter 873. Yun Jian did not come here to poach Peter. She came here to watch Yun Yi's competition. Moreover, Yun Jian did not even know that Peter would be here. However, Yun Jian did not expect that she would be able to poach Peter over just like that. However, she had to admit that this trip was really worth it. After all, Peter was an international master thief. He was one of the top figures in the entire world. For such a big shot like Peter to join the Kosha mercenaries, it was also a way to expand the Kosha mercenaries' strength. After all, those old guys had been eliminated. At this juncture, expanding the strength of the Kosha mercenaries was a path that Yun Jian had to take. The competition has started. Ning Lan Lan said to Yun Jian excitedly. Of course, she was not excited because the competition was about to start, but because Xiao Zhiming was by her side. Ning Lanlan was dragged by Yun Jian to watch Yun Yi's competition. As Ning Lanlan Sr., Xiao Zhiming naturally would not leave. Yun Jian could also feel Ning Lanlan's admiration for Xiao Zhiming, so she did not say anything. After Xiao Zhiming came over, Shan Zihao followed as well. Yun Jian might not hate Xiao Zhiming, but Yun Jian did not like to see Shan Zihao. However, since he was shameless enough to stick to her, Yun Jian could not do anything about it. Peter stood rooted to the spot, dumbfounded. No matter how he racked his brain, he could not figure out the relationship between Yun Jian and Gu Sha mercenaries. It was undeniable that Peter was a little slow. He stood there thinking for a long time before he suddenly remembered. Yun Jian wanted him to join the Kosha mercenaries because she wanted him to join the Kosha mercenaries. However, Yun Jian wanted him to look for Snake. Lizard, Snake. Lizard was the leader of the Kosha mercenaries. What did Yun Jian mean by asking him to find Snake? Lizard. Peter held his forehead with both hands. He shook his head and couldn't stop thinking. What was the relationship between them? If Yun Jian could send him to the Kosha mercenaries, it meant that her position in the Kosha mercenaries was not low. However, if she could order the leader of the Kosha mercenaries, Snake Lizard, to do things for her, it meant that her position was higher than Snake Lizard's. If Yun Jian's status was higher than Snake Lizard's, then there was only one possibility, then she is. Just as Peter thought of this, he suddenly covered his mouth and widened his eyes in horror. Could she be the legendary person? Just as Peter was thinking about this, Yun Jian, Ning Lanlan, and the others arrived at the arena. Cheers had already begun to erupt from the competition grounds. The intensity of the competition was no less than that of the junior division. Although there were more participants in the junior division than the senior division. Yun Jian darted out from the crowd. She saw Yun Yi from afar at first glance. Yun Yi was the same as Su Haokol. Both of them were handsome and tall young men. Hence, Yun Jian could see them from the crowd. The moment Yun Jian walked over, Su Haokol saw her first. Su Haokol happened to be standing beside Yun Yi. When he saw Yun Jian coming over, Su Haokol even poked Yun Yi, who was still looking around. Yun Yi followed Su Haokol's gaze and saw Yun Jian standing in the crowd looking at her. Yun Yi turned around and smiled at Yun Jian. Bro, do your best, Yun Jian mouthed silently to Yun Yi. Chapter 874. Yun Yi and Su Haokol were both very good at speaking English. This time, Yun Yi and Su Haokol were the representatives of the first senior high school to participate in the competition. Therefore, Yun Yi's English was better than Su Haokol's. Therefore, Yun Yi and Su Haokol got very good results in the first round of the competition. After the second round of the competition, the winner was decided. Without a doubt, Yun Yi was the top student in the middle school. Yun Yi got the same result as Yun Jian. The only difference was that Yun Jian was the top student in the middle school section, while Yun Yi was the top student in the high school section. Su Haokol also got a good result. Although he was not as good as Yun Yi, he still got the 10th place in the whole high school, which was quite good. After the two competitions were over, the students went back home. Lawson wanted to go out with Yun Jian, but he was invited by the school to be the referee, so he had to go back home after the competition. Today was Wednesday, and it was not the weekend yet. Lawson was embarrassed to ask Yun Jian to play truant with him, so he had to give up the chance to compete with Yun Jian again. Before he left, however, Lawson reminded Yun Jian again and again that they would meet again next time. When he was about to leave, Lawson said to Yun Jian in English, "Yun Jian, the next time we meet, you must let me win." Next time, he did not know if there would be a next time. In spite of it, Yun Jian smiled and nodded with pressed lips. And then, in the end, Yun Jian added, "The next time we meet, you will still be defeated by me." Yun Jian's words were harsh, but this time, they were very encouraging to Lawson. He laughed and said goodbye to Yun Jian. As for Ning Lanlan, her new friend, she exchanged contact information with Yun Jian and promised to go out together next time. Yun Jian had a good impression of Ning Lanlan, so she was happy to be friends with her, so she nodded and agreed. In the end, Shan Zihao watched as Yun Jian took the bus back to Longmen No. 1 High School. Since he had a good impression of Yun Jian, he could only watch her leave. However, Shan Zihao was not willing to give up just like that. It was rare for him to like a girl, so how could he give up before pursuing her? Moreover, Xiao Zhiming was his buddy, and Xiao Zhiming was close with Ning Lanlan. Now that Ning Lanlan was close to Yun Jian, as long as he held on to Ning Lanlan, he was not afraid that he could not catch up to Yun Jian. A week passed by quickly. It was Friday in the blink of an eye. Yun Jian carried her backpack and walked out of the school. In the past, with Chen Xinyi and Zhang Xiaofeng accompanying her, the journey from the teaching building to the school gate was filled with laughter. However, without the two clowns, Yun Jian felt empty in her heart, and it was not a good feeling. However, when she recalled Chen Xinyi's father inviting her to his house for dinner last week, Yun Jian felt relieved. This meant that she would be able to meet Chen Xinyi. Yun Jian then hurried home. She would not be having dinner at home today. Yun Jian returned to Dong Ruan's villa, tossed her backpack into her room, and went downstairs. She was going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. As Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's wedding was getting closer, Qin Yiru would definitely move to Gu Yunjian's house if they got married. Hence, Qin Yiru had already started moving her things. They had already agreed on tonight. Qin Yiru brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to Gu Yunjian's house, intending to enjoy a table of delicious food. Chapter 875. Yun Jian had just reached the middle of the staircase when she felt Ce standing behind her. I'm going to Officer Ji's house for dinner. Yun Jian could feel Ce standing behind her. She pursed her red lips and said. Before Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru got married, Yun Jian had always addressed Gu Junjian as Officer Gu. After all, once Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were legally married, it would only be reasonable for Yun Jian to address Gu Junjian as Dad. Yun Jian knew that Ce didn't know that they were going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. Hence, she turned her head and looked at him with her big black eyes. Mom told us that we'll go to Officer Ji's house for dinner after school. Yun Jian added, my brother will be there too. Adam and Lan Su will be there too. You can come with me. There was no one at home. Everyone was rushing to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner. Yun Jian didn't expect Ce to be back at this time because he was usually at an Hun organization from Monday to Friday. Emichim, Ce's honest voice sounded. His handsome face was slowly leaning towards Yun Jian. So you're saying that there's no one at home now? Ce's warm breath surrounded Yun Jian. This made Yun Jian feel a tingling sensation. Emichim, Yun Jian didn't think too much about it. She turned around and was about to go downstairs when she said to Ce, let's go over quickly too. My mom said that we should come early tonight. Otherwise, the food will get cold. Ever since she bought phones for Qin Yiru and Yun Yi, it was very convenient for Yun Jian to contact them. Upon hearing Yun Jian say that there was no one at home, Ce's eyes flashed. Just as Yun Jian was about to turn around and head downstairs, Ce suddenly grabbed her wrist. Yun Jian was stunned, but she didn't think too much about it. Let's hurry over. Before she could finish her sentence, Ce suddenly pulled Yun Jian over. He pulled Yun Jian to the stairs and blocked her with his muscular body. Like a cabotin, he pinned Yun Jian against the wall of the stairs. Yun Jian was shocked and wanted to say something, but Ce ruthlessly squeezed her words out. Her lips were tightly shut as she tossed and turned. Ce was panting heavily as he kissed Yun Jian. Yunjian shuddered from the kiss. Coupled with Siyi's steady breathing, her emotions were in a mess. Just as Yunjian was about to suffocate, Siyi let go of her. At the same time, Yunjian was looking away from the corner of her eyes. Siyi was tall. He was one step lower than Yunjian, but he was still about half a head taller than Yunjian. Siyi extended his slender arms to hold Yunjian's head and gently moved Yunjian in front of him to look into his eyes. Xiao Jian, what should I do? You're so beautiful. I don't want anyone to see your beauty. Siyi looked at Yunjian affectionately. After a while, Siyi held Yunjian's head again and inched closer. Yunjian knew that Siyi must have known about Shan Zihao's love for her. Siyi was not around when it happened, but he would know if Yunjian made any noise. When their lips were about to touch, Yunjian felt Siyi's breath filling her. He looked at her with his dark eyes and said, I really want to imprison you under me. As he spoke, he pressed his lips against hers. Chapter 876. Yunjian's eyes instantly lit up. At the same time, Siyi's mischievous hand had already gently slid across Yunjian's flat stomach. Their lips were still pressed together. Siyi's lips carried a faint fragrance. Yunjian didn't hate it. Instead, she was looking forward to it. However, when Siyi's hand reached under Yunjian's clothes, Yunjian could no longer pretend that she didn't see anything. She quickly reached out and pressed down on Siyi's mischievous hand. Her eyes widened. However, this didn't seem to be able to stop Siyi's hand. Siyi's hand slid past Yunjian's clothes and broke through Yunjian's resistance. He slid along Yunjian's beautiful body and slid into her bra. His hand covered her left breast. Yunjian's entire body went numb. Just as she was about to pull his hand away, she felt Siyi's lips on hers become even more unbridled. Yunjian's lips were sealed. Her lips couldn't move. She pressed against Siyi's chest with her hand, as if she wanted to push Siyi away so that his hand would leave her body. However, Siyi didn't release his hand. Looking at Yunjian in front of him, he felt that she was even more alluring. His large hand even caressed her a little and gently grabbed her. Yunjian had never been so close to a certain part of her body. She couldn't help but groan. However, her eyes were wide open. The blush on her face was a sign of her shyness at this moment. Just as Yunjian was about to suffocate, Siyi finally let go of Yunjian's lips. However, at the same time, he used his other hand to grab a certain part of her butt. Yunjian's entire body shuddered as she felt the soft sensation of her forbidden area being touched. Yunjian almost groaned again. Let go. Let go. In the next second, Yunjian, who had regained her right to speak, slapped Siyi's hand a few times. However, to Siyi, it didn't hurt at all. At this moment, Siyi had already leaned over to Yunjian's ear. At this moment, one of Siyi's legs was shorter than Yunjian's, while the other leg was on the same position as Yunjian's. Even so, he was still taller than Yunjian by half a head. At this moment, Siyi had already bent down and pressed his lips against Yunjian's earlobe, where her collarbone was. Xiao Jian, you're so beautiful. Siyi moaned softly. Right after that, he pressed his lips against Yunjian's neck even more brazenly. His domineering and possessive voice rang again. Next time, you're not allowed to be so close to other guys. If they pester you, you're not allowed to be within 3 meters of them either. As he spoke, Siyi's handsome lips curled up slightly. If anyone present saw how Siyi looked right now, they would definitely be mesmerized by his demeanor. His flawless and absolutely possessive handsome face was enough to make people infatuated just by recalling his handsome face. If you don't listen to me next time, then. Ce had already moved his lips back to Yunjian's earlobe. With a smirk, he uttered his final words, "Then I'll make you mine right away. Right away. Right away." God knew how much he wanted this girl in front of him. However, once he recalled his promise to Qin Yiru, it looked like he was going to have to break his promise. It was impossible for him to wait until Yunjian came of age. Yunjian was dazed by Ce's words, but her cheeks were burning. She had never been treated like this before, but if someone else had told her this, Yunjian would not have felt anything. Chapter 877. In spite of it, Ce's naughty hand was still glued to Yunjian's plump breasts when he said that. His other hand was on one of her buttocks. Both of his actions made Yunjian blush uncontrollably. Strangely, this new and entirely different feeling did not make Yunjian feel disgusted. Instead, she was looking forward to what he was going to do next. Yunjian was shocked by her own thoughts. Shaking her head, she bit her lip lightly and tossed the thought to the back of her mind. "Xiao Jian, are you back? Why didn't you close the door? What if a stray dog came in?" Yunyi's voice came from the door. It was a villa and was surrounded by places that only the rich could afford to live in. However, there were plenty of stray dogs and domesticated dogs nearby. Some time ago, because the owner of a nearby villa forgot to close the door, a stray dog ran into his house. After the stray dog ran into his house, the owner of the villa returned home and saw it. Naturally, he wanted to drive the stray dog away. However, the dog became arrogant when it was chased by the owner and bit him. The owner went to the hospital to get a rabies vaccine. In the end, he received news that the stray dog died not long after. The reason was that the stray dog had contracted rabies. Rabies was a very scary virus. When one was bitten by a dog and was not treated in time and the dog happened to be infected with rabies, the person who was bitten would be infected with the disease. Of course, those who went to the hospital for a rabies vaccine before the disease acted up were usually fine. Once it did, however, there was no one in the world who could be saved, let alone getting a rabies vaccine. Some people did not have a strong immune system and died from the rabies vaccine after being bitten. Moreover, people who were infected with rabies would usually die within a few months. The owner of the villa was bitten when he chased the dog away, so he went to get a rabies vaccine immediately. However, the prevention was not in place and he contracted rabies as well. He died in less than a month. The incident stirred up a storm in Longmen City. Those who heard the news were terrified. Therefore, recently, it was popular to close the door after returning home. Therefore, when Yunyi came back and saw that the door was not closed, she said, "Don't worry." Suddenly hearing Yunyi's voice and seeing Ci's hands on her unspeakable parts, Yunjian's face turned red as if it had been dyed with blood. Her face was so red that she couldn't bear to let go. Ce looked at Yunjian. His eyes were filled with obsession, making it impossible for anyone to ignore his existence. "Xiao Jian. Aren't you at home?" At this moment, Yunyi had already walked in from the main entrance. Ce also let go of her hand immediately. It was an exciting game. She was so close to being seen by Yunyi. Yunjian's eyes were unbelievably red. Yunyi was already at the door. He did not suspect anything when he saw Ce and Yunjian standing on the stairs. "Xiao Jian, why aren't you answering? The door has to be closed in time. There are a lot of stray dogs now and rabies is at its peak," Yunyi said. Chapter 878. "I know, go. I'll be more careful next time." Yunjian's voice was soft and carried a sense of tenderness. Of course, this was only Ce's opinion. Yunjian lowered her gaze as well. Yunjian was good at adjusting her emotions. She recovered quickly and looked at Yun-yi, saying, "Gu, let's go to Officer Ji's house for dinner today. Mom mentioned it before." Do you know? Other than the blush on Yunjian's cheeks, she had completely recovered. It was unknown if she had covered it up well or if it was natural. I know. Mom already called me, Yun-yi replied and patted his pants pocket, indicating that there was a phone inside. Qin Yiru and Yun-yi now had the phones Yunjian bought for them. Yun-yi could contact Qin Yiru normally even if she stayed in school. I'll put my bag in my room. Let's go over quickly. Don't let them wait too long, Yun-yi said and headed upstairs. When they passed by the stairs where Yunjian and Ce were, Yun-yi glanced at Yunjian suspiciously before looking at Ce. Something felt off about the atmosphere. In spite of it, Yun-yi did not dwell on it. He bypassed Yunjian and Ce naturally and went to the second floor. It was only when Yun-yi went to the second floor that Yunjian breathed a sigh of relief. She then turned to go downstairs, ignoring Ce for the time being. He was getting bolder. It was the same when they went for a barbecue last time. It was the same at home now. If she continued to take it, would he not? Yunjian did not continue thinking about it. She stepped on the stairs and smoothed her clothes gently. Xiao Jian. Watching Yunjian run to the first floor, Ce's starry eyes flashed. In the next second, he called out to Yunjian in a gentle and soft voice. Ce admitted that he had never spoken to anyone in such a gentle tone. He would kill anyone who pissed him off. It was definitely not a casual remark. This could be seen from the things that had happened back then. However, he was more patient and attentive to Yunjian than he had ever been. He could treat Yunjian with the most gentle side. Seeing that Yunjian was ignoring him, Ce went downstairs with a smile. Ce's legs were long, so he caught up to Yunjian in a few steps and grabbed Yunjian's wrist. After grabbing Yunjian's wrist, he moved his hand down and interlaced his fingers with Yunjian's. It was then that an awkward cough came from the stairs leading from the first floor to the second floor. Cough, cough, cough. It was obvious that Yun-yi had seen Ce's actions from the stairs. Just as Yun-yi's cough was heard, Yun-yi was already on the first floor. He did not look at Ce and Yunjian but coughed twice before telling Ce, "Brother-in-law, let's go." He was thrilled to be called brother-in-law. So what if Ce was older than him? In the end, he still had to be called brother-in-law by him. Hee. Yun-yi snickered and pretended to be serious as he walked out of the house. When Ce heard Yun-yi call him brother-in-law, he was in a good mood again. Then, he held Yunjian's hand and walked out. Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were in different places. However, Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were both villas. Not everyone could afford to live in these villas. However, it was a long journey from Dong Ruan's house to Gu Yunjian's house. Chapter 879. Gu Junjian also lived in a villa area. The villa area here was much larger than the villa area where Dong Ruan's family lived, and it was surrounded by trees. At a glance, other villas could not be seen. There were also some overall facilities. Compared to Dong Ruan's villa, it was much better. If one had to ask why, it was because the villas here were only sold to people who had made contributions to the country. Perhaps it was an order from the higher-ups, so the land in this area could only be sold to people who had made great contributions to the country. Gu Junjian was undoubtedly one of the best candidates. In addition, Gu Yunjian's family was very rich. Therefore, it was very reasonable for him to want to buy a villa here. Are you sure it's here? Yun-yi was shocked when she arrived at the gate. The iron gate in front of her was already as big as the school gate. Looking in from the gate, the villa was filled with flower beds and surrounded by green trees. Looking from the gate, she could not see the villa at all. However, this also reflected that Gu Yunjian's family was extraordinarily big. Perhaps compared to Dong Ruan's family, Gu Yunjian's family was many times bigger. Therefore, Yun Yi was immediately stunned. Yun Jian and Ce had seen villas that were hundreds or thousands of times better than this, so naturally, they were not surprised. "Hello, are you young Master Yun Yi and Miss Yun Jian?" At this moment, an old man sitting in the guardhouse at the gate walked out and asked Yun Jian and Yun Yi respectfully. This old man had been guarding the gate here for decades. He had been here since Gu Junjian bought this villa. This old man's surname was Ding. Uncle Ding had been guarding here since Gu Junjian and his ex-wife got married. Before Yun Jian and Yun Yi came, Uncle Ding had been instructed by Gu Junjian not to block Yun Jian and Yun Yi at the gate when they came over. "We are." Yun Yi nodded politely at Uncle Ding. "Then come in." Uncle Ding quickly ran over to open the door. Once the door opened, Yun Jian and the other two walked in. There were many flowers and plants in the villa. It took about 5 to 6 minutes to walk from the gate to the villa. "This is it." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Then, she, Ce, and Yun Yi walked into the house. The gate of the villa was not closed, so Yun Jian and the other two were able to walk in easily. Just as they entered, they saw Qin Yiru coming out with 2 plates of dishes. When she saw Yun Jian and the others, she could not help greeting them, "Ae. Xiao Jian, Xiao Yi, you're all here. Sit down, it's time to eat." As she spoke, Qin Yiru carried the remaining 2 plates of dishes to the dining table. There was a long dining table in front of them. Xiao Yunju, Ce, Lan Su, Adam, and Immerse were already seated. Even Gu Junjian was already waiting there. Seeing Yun Jian and the others, Adam even moved his lips. "They're here, they're here. They're finally here. Let's eat." Shuang had already returned to Enhun group. Unlike Adam and Immerse, Shuang was Enhun's social leader. All of Enhun's missions and external dealings were handled by Shuang in place of Ce. Compared to Adam and Immerse, Shuang did not have much free time. Chapter 880. The group sat down around the long table. The table was rather long but not ridiculously long. It was set up so that one could reach out and take a bite of the food. Even if there were a lot of people, they could still sit down. "Right, Xiao Jian said that you got first place in the foreign language competition in high school too." Qin Yiru asked Yun Yi when everyone was seated around the table. Yun Jian had already told Qin Yiru about what happened this Wednesday. The foreign language competition was announced by the school out of the blue and Yun Yi was a boarding student, so he had just returned home. Therefore, it was Yun Jian who told Qin Yiru that Yun Yi had won first place in high school. Hearing that her son and daughter had won first place in the city's foreign language competition in middle school and high school respectively, Qin Yiru was overwhelmed with pride. As their mother, how could Qin Yiru not feel proud? Although she had heard from Yun Jian that Yun Yi had won first place in high school's foreign language competition, Qin Yiru wanted to hear it from her son in person. I got first place in the competition this time," Yun Yi answered when he heard his mother's question. "Xiao Jian and Xiao Yi are smart kids indeed." Gu Junjian guffawed, the pride on his face unmistakable. Although Gu Junjian was not Yun Yi and Yun Jian's biological father, both children were actually much closer to Gu Junjian than their biological father, Yun Yi. Gu Junjian was especially nice to Qin Yiru. "It's all because of the children's hard work. It's my blessing to have these 2 children." Qin Yiru chuckled with a hand covering her mouth, but the smile on her face did not diminish. Compared to Qin Yiru and Gu Yunjian's friendliness, Adam never stopped talking. This was mainly because Qin Yiru's cooking was too delicious, so Adam didn't even have the time to stop and speak. "Is there anyone who eats like you? Your legs have just recovered." If you become crippled, I won't be responsible for helping you. Lan Su was sitting beside Adam. Seeing the way Adam ate, she couldn't help but say something to him. I'm not. My leg still hurts. I got hurt because of you, so you have to support me. When Adam heard that Lan Su wasn't going to support him, he didn't even have the energy to eat the drumstick in his hand. He immediately threw it into the bowl. That aggrieved look made it seem as if Adam was a little wife who had been bullied by Lan Su. Come on, eat your food. You even wanted to fight with me yesterday. Where did that energy go? Immerse glared at Adam and blindly spoke the truth. Ha! Adam also laughed awkwardly, looking as if he was a little embarrassed. Chi. At this moment, the sound of several sports cars drifting by suddenly sounded at the door. Someone came in. After all, Uncle Ding was guarding the door, so ordinary people shouldn't be able to come in. However, the sound of these sports cars drifting by and stopping at the front door of the villa was so eye-catching. Who came? I'll go take a look. Gu Junjian frowned slightly. Then he stood up and was about to walk out. Okay. Qin Yiru nodded. The moment Gu Junjian stood up from the dining chair, a group of people suddenly walked in through the door of the villa. The leader was a man in his 20s. The man had dyed his hair red, yellow, blue, and green. His short hair had all kinds of colors. It was obvious that it was dyed. However, if one looked at it directly, they would be able to see that the man in the lead had similar eyebrows to Gu Junjian. Chapter 881. Gu Junjian was slightly stunned when he saw Gu Xian. After hearing Gu Junjian's words, coupled with Gu Junjian's reaction, and the fact that Gu Xian and Gu Junjian looked like they were carved from the same mold, everyone present had an idea of what was going on based on these few points alone. This Gu Xian was most likely the son of Gu Junjian and his ex-wife. Qin Yiru recognized him at first glance. Moreover, Qin Yiru had heard from Gu Junjian that his son with his ex-wife was called Gu Xian. Now that she heard Gu Junjian call the man with dyed red, yellow, blue, and green hair, Xian, she could immediately confirm that he was Gu Yunjian's son. Yunjian could naturally guess as well. However, at this moment, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Ha! The atmosphere became more and more oppressive. At this moment, Gu Xian, who was standing there, suddenly let out a cold chuckle. This chuckle, coupled with Gu Xian's hair, gave people the first impression that he was a hooligan that was not to be trifled with. By the time everyone turned to look at Gu Xian, he was already slowly making his way over. Gu Xian not only dyed his hair stylishly, but he also dressed very fashionably. Qin Yiru's heart skipped a beat when she saw his tattered pants and his roguish sneer. Junjian, this is Xian, right? Qin Yiru turned to ask Gu Junjian to ease the awkward atmosphere. Qin Yiru had already changed her way of addressing Gu Junjian. She no longer called him Officer Gu. Qin Yiru simply wanted to use Gu Yunjian's introduction to greet Gu Xian. For Qin Yiru, it was her principle to behave properly. Gu Junjian nodded in tacit agreement. Little Xian, this is yours. Gu Junjian had just finished his sentence when Gu Xian interrupted him. Ha! What? You're not happy to see me back, right? You didn't even inform me in advance that you're getting married, did you? Gu Xian's voice was a little strange. It was filled with mockery and ridicule. Gu Junjian did not tell Gu Xian that he was going to get married. That was because Gu Junjian had always known that his divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to Gu Xian. That was why Gu Xian chose to study abroad. That was why Gu Xian would rather stay abroad than spend the new year with his biological father. However, Gu Junjian wasn't trying to hide it. On the contrary, Gu Junjian didn't know how to break the news to Gu Xian. Of course, during this period, Gu Junjian had been thinking about how to break the news to Gu Xian that he was going to marry another wife. That was why Gu Junjian kept delaying it. However, on the day of the actual wedding, Gu Junjian would of course inform his own son. However, from Gu Xian's point of view, the meaning of this was very different. When his father divorced his mother, it was done without a word. He didn't care about him at all. When parents divorced, no one was more upset than the child. Regarding this matter, Gu Xian had always held a grudge in his heart. However, what did he see when he came in today? Gu Junjian was happily chatting with his new wife. Did he ever think about his own son? Xian it's not what you think, Gu Junjian still wanted to say something, but before Gu Junjian could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. Gu Xian shouted at Gu Junjian emotionally, if it's not what I think, then what is it? Gu Junjian, you've been seduced by a vixen, right? You don't even want your own son anymore. As Gu Xian spoke, he pointed at Qin Yiru and shouted at Gu Junjian. Chapter 882. Just as Gu Xian spoke up to this point, a bowl was suddenly slammed onto the table. When the bowl was slammed onto the table, it immediately made a loud noise. Bang! Everyone present was frightened by the loud noise in front of them, and their souls shrank fiercely. Of course, this excluded Ce, Adam, Mo Sen, Lan Su, and Yun Yi. As for Gu Xian and the group of people who came in with Gu Xian, they were all shocked. Gu Xian didn't come back alone. He came back with a group of friends. There were about 3 or 4 of Gu Xian's friends, and one of them was a tall and strong foreigner. The others were from country Z. These were all Gu Xian's friends and classmates from his overseas school. When he heard from others that his father was getting married, Gu Xian practically rushed back from abroad with a few of his good buddies. However, just as Gu Xian accused Qin Yiru of marrying him for Gu Yunjian's money, Yun Jian slammed the bowl in her hand onto the table with a loud bang. It had to be said that Gu Xian had crossed Yun Jian's bottom line. And Yun Jian's bottom line was Qin Yiru. If Gu Xian hadn't insulted Qin Yiru, then Yun Jian naturally wouldn't have done anything. However, the problem was that Gu Xian had actually accused Qin Yiru of being a woman who got close to Gu Junjian for money. This was something that Yun Jian couldn't tolerate. Just as Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were stunned by Yun Jian's actions, Yun Jian's sharp words rang out. I dare you to say that again. Yun Jian's words carried a power that made it impossible for people not to be afraid, but at least Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were shocked. After coming back to his senses, Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian, who stood up from the dining chair. He pretended to be bold and looked back at Yun Jian. Gu Xian gritted his teeth. He immediately looked at Yun Jian with an imposing manner and replied, Who are you? What does my family's business have to do with you? Gu Xian hadn't been obedient all these years. Gu Yunjian's divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to him, so Gu Xian had been living a leisurely life abroad these years. In his free time, he had befriended a group of hooligan-like buddies. Therefore, Gu Xian's tone was a little boastful. I'm not anyone. Your family's future has nothing to do with me, and I'm not interested in your family's future at all, Yun Jian said. Yun Jian paused. Then her eyes suddenly became sharp, and those sharp eyes carried an irresistible courage. But the person you insulted just now is my mother. I don't care about your family's business, but if you insult my mother, then I won't allow it. Yun Jian said word by word. Her words carried an irresistible authority. Even Gu Junjian wanted to speak up for Yun Jian. Others might not know, but how could Gu Junjian not know? Not only did Yun Jian have several identities now, more importantly, she was the boss of the internationally renowned Kosha mercenaries. How could the boss of Kosha mercenaries, the mother of slaying God, the world's top secret agent, be someone who lacked money? Ha! Who knows if it's an insult or not? Maybe your mom got close to my dad for money. Gu Xian hated Gu Junjian now, so he did not have a good opinion of Yun Jian and Qin Yiru. Xian don't spout nonsense. Xiao Jian is your younger sister from now on. Gu Junjian could not help growling at his son. Chapter 883. However, Gu Junjian did not yell at Gu Xian because in Gu Yunjian's opinion, he had already let his son down. Gu Junjian himself admitted that he had been busy with military affairs and had paid little attention to his family. Gu Yunjian's ex-wife had run away with another man and divorced him because of this. It was also because of this that Gu Xian deeply hated his biological father, Gu Junjian. Therefore, when Gu Xian wanted to study abroad, and when Gu Xian wanted to do a series of things, including making a group of bad friends, Gu Junjian did not participate too much. This was because Gu Junjian felt that he had let Gu Xian down. Even when they were young, Gu Junjian had always listened to Gu Xian and had never insulted him. If it were not for Gu Xian's outrageous words, Gu Junjian would not have spoken to Gu Xian in such a tone. All these years, his father had never insulted him, but because of Qin Yiru, he had insulted him. Gu Xian looked at him in disbelief. You've changed. You never said that to me before. Gu Xian looked at Gu Junjian with hatred. He was not even willing to call him dad. To Gu Xian, Gu Junjian had never cared about his family before. After his mother cheated on him, Gu Junjian divorced his biological mother without saying a word. Since he was young, he had been more miserable than others. Therefore, Gu Xian felt that he should enjoy Gu Yunjian's apology. He should make Gu Junjian regret it. In fact, there were many people who had the same idea as Gu Xian. Gu Xian had turned himself into a hooligan, or perhaps it was because he had fallen from grace. In fact, he had only done this for one thing. He wanted Gu Junjian to regret it. He wanted Gu Junjian to see what he had done in the past. He wanted his son to become the kind of person he should not be. Gu Xian had become like this because of Gu Junjian. As expected, it's just like what others say. When a mistress enters the family, everything is decided by the mistress. I won't acknowledge such a shameless vixen. I don't have a sister. My parents only gave birth to me. Gu Xian roared at Gu Junjian. His eyes were filled with hatred. Shut up. After Gu Xian roared, Gu Junjian did not wait for Yun Jian to make a move. He grabbed the bowl in his hand and threw it at Gu Xian. This was the first time Gu Junjian had been so angry and hit Gu Xian. Gu Xian's words completely enraged Gu Junjian. Gu Xian called Qin Yiru a vixen. To be honest, Gu Junjian could not hold it in anymore. Qin Yiru was the person Gu Junjian had decided on. In other words, Gu Junjian had already decided that Qin Yiru would be the person who would share the joys and sorrows of his life with him. Therefore, even his son, who he had always tolerated, would not allow him to insult her like this. Ping 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 pang pang. The bowl was thrown at Gu Xian in an arc Gu Xian did not dodge. He watched as Gu Junjian threw the bowl at him, and finally, the rice in the bowl was thrown at him. The person who was smashed was stunned for a moment. He had always thought that his father, Gu Junjian, would tolerate him in the future because of his guilt. However, ever since he walked into the house and saw Gu Junjian chatting and eating with Qin Yiru and the others, Gu Xian felt that he no longer belonged to this family. He felt that he was very pitiful and miserable. Gu Junjian, you will regret this. Gu Xian glared at Gu Junjian fiercely. After he finished speaking, he ran out without even looking at his friends. Chapter 884. In that situation, Gu Xian's friends didn't say anything. After all, it was their family matter. However, when they saw Gu Xian rush out without looking back, Guxian's friends also ran out. It wasn't easy for the child to come back. Even if he said something unpleasant, you shouldn't treat him like this. The child is still young. Some things can be discussed slowly. Qin Yiru's hands were tightly clasped together. She stood up hesitantly and spoke to Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was very kind. Even if Gu Xian had insulted her and called her a vixen, Qin Yiru wasn't angry. Of course, Qin Yiru wasn't the kind of person who liked to be bullied. However, she understood how big of a blow a child's parents' divorce was. Back then, Qin Yiru didn't want to divorce Yun Gang because she was afraid that Yun Jian and Yuni wouldn't be able to accept it. If one were to ask Qin Yiru why she understood this kind of rebellious mentality, it was because Dong Ruan's parents had divorced long ago. Dong Ruan often complained to her about this. When Dong Ruan's parents divorced, it was a big blow to Dong Ruan and Siyi's mother. Especially Dong Ruan. She studied so hard when she was young because she wanted to be strong. However, Qin Yiru knew that Dong Ruan's parents' divorce was no different from the sky falling down on her. Especially after Dong Ruan's parents reorganized their families, Dong Ruan became an outsider in that family. Although Dong Ruan's parents were rich and Dong Ruan had never lacked financial love, to Dong Ruan, without family love, it was as if she had lost everything in life. Qin Yiru didn't want Yun Jian and Yuni to become like that, so she didn't divorce Yun Gang. However, since Yun Jian and Yuni didn't think that way and Yun Gang cheated, Qin Yiru decided to go all out and divorce Yun Gang. I'll go check on him. Qin Yiru was overflowing with maternal love. She was a kind person, so when she saw Gu Xian running out, she stood up and chased after him. Gu Junjian held his forehead with his hand, a look of despair and pain on his face. It was not that Gu Junjian did not expect Gu Xian to hate him, but what could he do? What could he do? Seeing Qin Yiru run out, Yun Jian was worried that she would be bullied by Gu Xian. Therefore, Yun Jian also stood up. She said to the few people present and then followed Qin Yiru out. I'll go take a look too. After Yun Jian finished speaking, she left the dining chair and walked out of the door. Yun Jian knew that it would be very awkward for Gu Junjian to go out in this situation, especially when Gu Xian was still angry. However, if Qin Yiru went out alone, Yun Jian was afraid that Qin Yiru would be bullied. Just as Yun Jian stood up, Ce stood up at the same time. He did not say anything and followed Yun Jian out of the door. On the other side, Gu Xian simply rushed out of the door. Unknowingly, it had started to drizzle outside the door. Gu Xian plunged into the rain, but he did not feel cold or chilly at all. He had been waiting for his mother to come back, to reconcile with his father, and for the family to be reunited. However, all of this was shattered. When he saw Gu Junjian happily with Qin Yiru and the others, he suddenly felt that he could not fit in with this family. Was his existence superfluous? Xian. A few of Gu Xian's friends rushed out and grabbed Gu Xian. At that moment, Gu Xian was on the verge of collapse. He looked like a dying man on the brink of death. Chapter 885. Xian, it's not easy for you to come home. Don't be angry with your father. Come home with me, okay? Qin Yiru said gently as she walked over. As she spoke, Qin Yiru even reached out to help Gu Xian. However, Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru's hand coming towards him from the corner of his eye, and his heart was filled with hatred. Get lost. Hypocrite, who allowed you to call me Xian? Disgusting, don't touch me. As Gu Xian spoke, he reached out and slapped away Qin Yiru's hand that was reaching towards Gu Xian. Qin Yiru sincerely reached out to help Gu Xian, but who knew that when Gu Xian slapped her, Qin Yiru would take 2 steps back. It took her a long time to stabilize her feet, but because her left foot accidentally twisted, she fell into a puddle. Ah! Qin Yiru shrieked before her feet gave way and she fell into a puddle that was filled by the drizzle. You vixen! Who told you to be hypocritical and bully Xian? Go to hell! A guy standing next to Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru fall into the puddle, so he directly walked over and lifted his foot. It looked like he was going to kick Qin Yiru. This guy from Gu Xian was dressed like a rich man, and the arrogance on his face could not be described with words. Arrogant, conceited, these were all enough to describe this guy. Shenjie, stop! Seeing that his friend was about to step on Qin Yiru for him, Gu Xian looked at Qin Yiru, who fell to the ground, and looked at Qin Yiru's face that was slightly old due to overwork, and he unconsciously shouted. However, Gu Xian's friend did not listen to Gu Xian's words, and this guy called Shenjie still stepped on Qin Yiru. F***CKU, mistress, bitch. Go to hell, bitch. Shenjie did not listen to his advice, and when Gu Xian reached out to stop him, Shenjie's foot had already landed on Qin Yiru's body. Qin Yiru had already accidentally fallen into the puddle, and now she was still angry after being kicked by Shenjie. At this time, Yunjian just happened to see this scene from the door, and she did not expect to see this scene at all. When she saw Shenjie kick Qin Yiru's abdomen, Yunjian growled, "Mom," and immediately rushed towards Qin Yiru. Gu Junjian, who was sitting in the room, was still holding his head with an embarrassed expression. At this time, he suddenly heard Yunjian's growl, and he suddenly stood up. What happened? What happened? Gu Junjian said as he stood up from the table, and he rushed towards the door. Gu Junjian believed in his son, Gu Xian's character. Although Gu Xian's words were unpleasant, he would not do such a crazy thing. Gu Junjian quickly thought of Gu Xian's brothers. Could it be, on this side, Shenjie kicked Qin Yiru's abdomen fiercely. Shenjie wanted to lift his leg to kick Qin Yiru again, but he was stopped by Gu Xian. F***CK, Gu Xian, what are you doing? Why do you care about this mistress? He might as well kill her directly. I'm trying to help you. Shenjie said confidently. Gu Xian did not know why, but when he looked at Qin Yiru's face, which was obviously overworked and slightly old, his heart tightened. What the hell, he actually pitied this mistress who was about to steal his father away. However, Gu Xian could not help but take 2 steps towards Qin Yiru. Chapter 886. Qin Yiru was already old, and after being kicked by Shenjie, she was a little dizzy. Because of overwork these years, Qin Yiru's body had some sequelae. However, Shenjie didn't care about this. For a rich young master like him, he could kick whoever he wanted, and he never cared about it. And now, Shenjie watched as Gu Xian extended his hand to help Qin Yiru up. He stood behind Gu Xian and laughed wildly, and even mocked Gu Xian. Gu Xian, are you stupid? That's a mistress. She wants to marry your dad and take away your dad's love, and you actually went to help her. I helped you kick her twice, and that's already letting her off easy, you. At this time, Gu Xian had already helped Qin Yiru up. However, at the same time, Shenjie, who was laughing wildly behind Gu Xian and mocking Gu Xian for helping Qin Yiru up, suddenly felt a gust of wind coming from behind him. In the next second, he felt as if someone had kicked him hard in the waist. By the time Shenjie reacted, the heavy kick had already landed on his waist. Being kicked in the waist from behind, Shenjie instinctively wanted to stand firm. However, the powerful force behind the kick sent Shenjie crashing to the ground. Gu Xian was supporting Qin Yiru, and Shenjie had his back facing them. Only the other 2 buddies of Gu Xian were watching from the side. However, at this moment, they saw a horrifying scene. They saw Yunjian madly rushing towards them. She lifted her legs, and those long legs seemed to have a huge amount of magic, running towards them at the speed of an arrow. Then, at the moment when she was close to Shenjie, Yunjian suddenly jumped on the ground with her right foot. She used the momentum of her right foot to sweep her body at a 90 degrees angle. At the last second when she was close to Shenjie, she switched from her right foot to her left foot. Her left foot suddenly stretched out, and with a charge, Yunjian's left foot fiercely kicked Shenjie, whose back was facing her. Shenjie was kicked almost at the same time. His whole body trembled as he took 2 steps forward. His legs went soft, and Shenjie actually knelt down with his face facing down. With this kneeling, Shenjie's upper body couldn't support himself, and he also fell to the ground like a frog. However, in front of Shenjie was a bumpy cement ground. Because of the rain, the bumpy cement ground was filled with a large amount of muddy cement. As for Shenjie, he directly crashed into the cement pit with his face down. However, Shenjie quickly reacted. In any case, Shenjie was also a young master who practiced taekwondo and sanda. When he reacted, he quickly stood up. Yunjian suddenly lifted her leg, and with a horizontal kick, Shenjie was once again kicked into the cement ground. But this time, Shenjie's face was facing the sky. But because of the previous kick, Shenjie's entire face was now covered with muddy cement. He couldn't even open his eyes. However, just as Shenjie was about to get up again, Yunjian's pair of jade feet fiercely stepped on Shenjie's abdomen. Not only that, after Yunjian stretched out her foot to step on Shenjie's abdomen, she also heavily shifted her foot twice. Shenjie felt that his internal organs in his abdomen were about to be shattered by Yunjian's kick. He couldn't open his eyes, and could only let out a scream. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.